Chapter 575. On the other hand, Yao Qinggu and his daughter didn't look too happy. They didn't look as happy as Madame Ma. Qin Yining had been kidnapped by the Taiden for a long time. Her appearance was like this. In their impression, the Taiden people were valiant people who ate raw meat and drank blood. What kind of man wouldn't be tempted by such an exquisite and beautiful girl? If Qin Yining wasn't pregnant and came back clean, they wouldn't doubt the child's bloodline even if she had a child in the future. They were afraid that Pang Xiao would be blinded by her beauty and raise someone else's child without knowing it. Yao Qinggu looked at Madame Ma's back as she held Qin Yining's hand and walked in front of them. He felt a burst of depression and helplessness in his heart. He secretly thought that this old woman's heart was too big. She wasn't afraid that her grandson would be labeled as a cuckold. Yao Qinggu felt melancholy. He took out the brass smoking pipe from behind his back and took out the tobacco from the small brocade pouch hanging on the pipe. Madame Ma heard the noise and turned around to look. She scolded with a sullen face, "You old man, Dai Fu's wife is pregnant. Why are you still smoking? Quickly put it away." If it was in the past, Yao Qinggu didn't want to quarrel with Madame Ma and obediently put away the tobacco. But at this moment, Yao Qinggu was thinking that perhaps his grandson had been cuckolded and didn't even know it. Who knew if the time he had just said was accurate? Perhaps the girl was pregnant with a barbarian bastard. He felt depressed, so he lowered his head and pressed the tobacco with his rough fingers, pretending that he hadn't heard Ma Shi's words. In fact, Madame Ma had been holding back her anger for a long time. Ever since the Yao clan said so many unconscionable things behind her back, she was so angry that she beat her with the sole of her shoe. However, Yao Qinggu said that they wouldn't abandon the Qin clan, but would support Dai Fu to take in a concubine. At that time, she felt that the father and daughter's actions were beyond her expectations. But now, the news of Qin Yining's pregnancy didn't make the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu happy. Instead, they showed such an expression. Madame Ma's anger grew stronger and stronger. Madame Ma looked at Qin Yining. She was afraid that the noise would make her unhappy, so she could only suppress her anger. She pulled Pang Xiao and said, "People have a conscience. Yining's parents spent so much effort to raise her well. Yining's parents. 2. Since she's good to you, you have to be good to her. You also have to be good to her parents. They only gave you a daughter. When you're old, as the son-in-law, you have to show them what you're capable of. Do you understand? Whatever you do, your children will learn from you. If you don't do well now, when your children learn, they will treat you the same way when you're old." As she spoke, she pinched Pang Xiao's muscular arm. Pang Xiao had heard his grandmother's nagging since he was a child. He felt that it was very affectionate, so he said with a smile, "Grandma, I know. This time, something happened outside. I also implicated father-in-law and sister Yi. Her second uncle lost his official position. I was afraid that father-in-law and his family would be in danger because of me, so I took the initiative to clean up the Snow Plum Courtyard and Su Shui Garden. I invited father-in-law and his family to move in so that it'll be easier for us to protect them." Madame Ma smiled and said, "That's good. Is old Madame Ma here too?" "She's here too. Old Madame Ma is good to Sister Yi, and Sister Yi is filial to old Madame Ma. When Sister Yi is pregnant, father-in-law and his family are very happy. Now that they're living close to each other, everyone is happy." Madame Ma nodded repeatedly and didn't suspect anything. "I'll go talk to my elder sister later. I've been looking forward to having someone to talk to. Usually, the Fu is so quiet. Now that it's lively, it feels like a home." At the back, the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu frowned even deeper. Yao Qinggu fiercely smacked his pipe and thought repeatedly in his heart, "Isn't this inviting a wolf into the house? That family Qin's official position has been taken away. Your Majesty definitely won't like it. If they live in the Fu like this, won't they implicate the Fu? What the Yao clan was thinking was, how are they going to calculate the cost of living together? Don't tell me they want her son to support two families. The Yao clan blurted out, when did this happen? You're already so old, but you're still so careless. Why didn't you discuss it with us first? You invited the in-laws just like this. Aren't you afraid of neglecting them? Qin Yining walked side by side with Pang Xiao and Madame Ma at the front. Although she didn't look back to observe, she clearly saw everyone's confrontation in her heart. The Yao clan suspected that she was unfaithful and that the child in her belly wasn't Pang Xiao's. This already made her secretly endure her anger. She didn't want to have discord with Pang Xiao's family. After all, they were living under the same roof. They still had a long time to live together. Once they had a falling out, it would be difficult for them to see each other in the future. It would also inevitably put Pang Xiao in a dilemma. Pang Xiao was already surrounded by enemies in the imperial court. It didn't make sense for him to return home and still be in chaos. However, it seemed that the Yao clan didn't take her patience seriously. Perhaps the Yao clan would even think that she didn't say anything because she felt guilty toward Pang Xiao. Thinking of this, Qin Yining smiled and stopped walking. He turned around and said, "Mother-in-law, you're treating us as outsiders. Although my family is temporarily living in the prince's mansion, they aren't living in those two courtyards for free. It just so happens that our family's original residence is a bit crowded. We plan to move to another place. However, every inch of land in the capital is worth an inch of gold. There are so many people that rarely give up their residence. We can't find a suitable place in such a short time. The courtyards in the prince's mansion are empty. They're also secretly subsidizing me. That's why they said that they rented Snow Plum Courtyard and Shuayu Yuan. Normally, we can just close the back alley door and live our own lives. Naturally, food and other things are not in the same place. My hometown is in the Yan dynasty. There are many fields and old residences near the old capital. There are also hot springs villas. However, it's too far away. Now that the situation is tense, it's inconvenient to leave the capital. Otherwise, my grandmother said that she would go to the south. When they heard Qin Yining call the Yao clan mother-in-law instead of a mother, everyone present understood that Qin Yining was well aware of their confrontation just now. Neither of them should treat the other as a fool. The Yao clan's expression became even more unsightly. She curled the corners of her mouth and said, "You're talking like an outsider. Even if we lend it to your family, it's fine. Why should we ask for rent? I understand what mother-in-law means." Qin Yining smiled and said, "However, even blood brothers have to settle accounts clearly. Besides, we're not blood brothers. Mother-in-law, you don't have to worry. My parents will only subsidize us more. As for children, I know what you're thinking. No matter if it's a son or a daughter, they're still my children. In other words, even without you surnamed Rome, I can still afford to raise them. At worst, I'll just raise them myself. Why should I be afraid of them?" Pang Xiao was already distressed. She was afraid that Qin Yining's anger would harm his health. Looking at the Yao clan's appearance, she also felt quite angry. She held Qin Yining's arm with one hand to help her breathe. Qin Yining's gaze moved away from the Yao clan's pale face and turned to look at Yao Qinggu with a smile. "Esteemed elder, I'm scared that I'll choke when I smell your smoke. I'm afraid that it'll hurt your great-grandson. Can you stop smoking? In the future, when I go to Pine Crane Hall to pay my respects, I'll ask you to smoke next door. Otherwise, it won't be good for the child." Yao Qinggu's expression was as unsightly as the Yao clan's. His lips trembled and his beard trembled. After a while, He knocked the tobacco pipe on the bottom of his shoe and stepped on the ashes that had fallen to the ground. He said mockingly, "Daughters of noble families are more precious than rural women. Esteemed elder is right." Qin Yining stood there in a dignified manner. She was clearly telling Yao Qinggu that she was originally a daughter of a respectable family, so he shouldn't use the method of bullying a country bumpkin to bully others. Could it be that he thought she would pinch her nose and resign herself to it? The Yao clan and Yao Qinggu were furious. They secretly scolded Qin Yining for being so improper. Seeing that Qin Yining was so unyielding, Madame Ma had no more doubts about her pregnancy. If she had a guilty conscience, wouldn't she have to lower herself and be a concubine? Alas, don't lower yourself to the level of those two country bumpkins. There's no need for rent at all. Your father and uncle sacrificed their careers for the Dai Fu. You're living together as a family, yet you still want to collect rent. Is that even something a human would do? Let's go, Grandma will send you back. I'll see if there's anything missing in your room. Madame Ma slapped Pang Zhao's hand away from Qin Yining's shoulder and snorted, "You're just standing there and watching your wife get bullied. If you're a man in the future, you'd better stand firm. If someone bullies your wife, can't you be a little angry?" Pang Zhao was scolded quite innocently. "Grandma, do you mean that I should bully my mother and grandfather?" As soon as he said that, Madame Ma laughed. "Yes. If anyone bullies your wife, you should bully them back." As she spoke, she turned around and glared fiercely at Yao Qinggu. "Is this old man an old fool? Go back and find a doctor to take a good look at you to see if there's water in your brain." After saying that, she took Qin Yining's hand and went to see Qin Garden. Pang Zhao's gloominess dissipated a lot. He followed behind Madame Ma with a smile and said, "If it's an outsider, I'll naturally let them do whatever they want. But if it's my own family, I can only ignore them." Yao Qinggu and Yao clan stood in place and watched Madame Ma and Pang Zhao protect Qin Yining on either side as they walked away. The father and daughter were quite angry. The two didn't want to provoke them, so they went back to Pine Crane Hall first. When they returned to Pine Crane Hall, Big White and Big Black had already been sent back by the servants. When they saw the father and daughter, they jumped over. Yao Qinggu was angry, but he kicked Big White away. Big White was intelligent. The little Pekingese whimpered when it was kicked, and it carefully shook its tail twice. Big Black nudged Big White with its mouth. One tall, one short, one black, and one white, simply ran away. Yao Qinggu went back into the room and started smoking again. Yao clan sat on the edge of the Kong bed. She pressed her lips together and pinched the table. Her delicately decorated nails were almost broken. "Dad, what do you think we should do about this? Do you think the child in Qin clan's belly is really our family's child?" Chapter 576. That may be the case, but look at how arrogant the Qin clan is. The Yao clan sneered, "What kind of lady is she? She's just a stray girl who wandered outside in her early years. She doesn't know how to respect her elders and has no manners at all." If this was in the general's estate, the only reason Big Madam could make her follow the rules until she died was because she had a soft mother-in-law like me. The Yao clan felt much better after scolding her for a while. She let out a sigh of relief and said, "She doesn't call me mother." "That's good, I'm too lazy to listen. I didn't raise her anyway. Do you expect me to stick dog meat to sheep? If she wants to pay the rent, she better hurry up. I'm afraid that Dai Fu, that silly girl, will be so charming that she'll pay the rent." After hearing his daughter complain, Yao Qinggu said, "That's not right. No matter what, you have to consider Dai Fu's future in the imperial court. Minister Qin isn't an ordinary person. Even if he's no longer an official in the imperial court, he's still an outstanding strategist. His daughter is with our Dai Fu. In the future, no matter what problems our Dai Fu faces, won't he risk his life to help our Dai Fu find a solution? Don't talk like that in the future. That's true. The Yao clan thought for a while and said worriedly, Father, do you think the child in the Qin clan's belly is really Dai Fu's? Is there a mistake? Hi, Dai Fu is very shrewd. Yao Qinggu didn't say anything else and continued to smoke. Actually, when he was asked by the Yao clan, he had some doubts in his heart. Looking at Qin Yining and Pang Zhao's attitude, he felt that the child was Pang Zhao's. But who could guarantee such a thing? Moreover, that girl was born with a beautiful appearance. What if Dai Fu liked her and was charmed by her and helped her hide it? These young people were easily swayed by their emotions. It was understandable that they would do things that made others helpless when they were hot-headed. Moreover, even if this child was Pang Zhao's, what if she had served someone else before? He felt a little disgusted that such a dirty woman was serving his grandson. Yao Qinggu put down his opium pipe and began to crack his melon seeds again. His eyes, however, were always in a daze. He kept thinking about the current situation. Pang Zhao was still young, so it was understandable for him to be impulsive. However, as an elder, he had to help Pang Zhao to prevent him from being cheated without knowing it. Right at this moment, someone came in from outside. Old master, the in-law wishes to see you. Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan were stunned and looked at each other. What a coincidence. Isn't it too much of a coincidence that Qin Huayuan came? Could it be that he had heard something? Invite Mr. In-law in. Yao Qinggu stood up and shook off the melon seed shells on his body. The maidservants quickly cleaned up the table and the floor. The Yao clan thought for a moment and didn't avoid him. Instead, they stood beside Yao Qinggu. Not long after, a thin and tall middle-aged man with an aura like that of a banished immortal lifted the curtain and walked in. Looking at his appearance and aura, one would think of the nickname Wise Panin, because the wisdom and intelligence between his eyebrows couldn't be hidden. His appearance and aura were also outstanding. Qin Huayuan came in and bowed to Yao Qinggu, Old Master Yao, in-law. I heard from my bodyguards that they had escorted you back safely, so I hurried over to take a look. You must have been tired along the way. Yao Qinggu's eyebrows twitched when he heard this. If he was a straightforward person, he probably wouldn't have analyzed the situation. Qin Huayuan's words were completely correct. However, after the unpleasant incident just now, Yao Qinggu couldn't help but think, sure enough, he had been in the imperial court for many years and had the title of Wise Panin. When he spoke, he played down the situation, but every word he said hit the nail on the head. The short conversation just now had pointed out two important points. First, Old Master Yao was surnamed Yao, and this prince's family was surnamed Yao. Even in-law was only a woman and didn't have the qualifications to participate in men's affairs. Second, they were able to safely return to the prince's mansion now thanks to Qin Huayuan's secret protection during this period of time. If he didn't take care of them, they would have been captured by Li Qitian after Pang Zhao left. And now they were talking about the reunion. Yao Qinggu narrowed his eyes and enthusiastically gave up his seat. It wasn't hard, it wasn't hard. Old Master Yao arranged everything very well. We didn't suffer much along the way. Servants, quickly bring some good tea. Qin Huayuan smiled politely and then sat down on the seat next to him. He said with a smile, my daughter is clumsy. She climbed up the social ladder to enter the prince's mansion. She has only been married for a short time. If there is anything she can't do, please teach her a lesson. As her father, I won't have the slightest complaint. As he spoke, he took out 3 banknotes worth 1,000 taels from his sleeve. They were all stamped with the big seal of Baotong. They could be used to withdraw shining silver from all the Baotong branches in the country. Qin Huayuan put the banknotes on the table and pushed them to Old Master Yao. He said with a smile, "This is the money for renting the Snow Plum Courtyard and Su Shui Garden." They just got married. Although Sister Yi's dowry is generous, my wife and I are afraid that they are young and don't know anything. What if they spend extravagantly? She could do whatever she wanted with the dowry money. I'll have to trouble old Master Yao and old Madam to help keep these 3,000 taels, lest they be ordered around because of their young age. As elders, we are doing this for the sake of our children. Don't you think so? Qin Huaiyuan said with a gentle smile. Whether it was his smile or his voice, it made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. Yao Qinggu did, but in his heart, he scolded Qin Huaiyuan for being too cunning. What did he mean by, "for the sake of his children"? What did he mean by, "for the sake of his children"? What he meant was that the money was his daughter's. The money was given to his daughter by him as a father. They could only look at it but couldn't use it. Moreover, Qin Huaiyuan's meaning was clear. The Qin family didn't live in the prince's mansion for free. They lived in the prince's mansion righteously. Even if they didn't have to pay rent, wasn't it natural for them to live in their daughters' and son-in-law's houses? There was another meaning, which made Yao Qinggu even more sullen. "I've already paid. Don't you want to express your gratitude?" Yao Qinggu really wanted to wave his hand and express his gratitude, but wouldn't that benefit others? What's more, his living expenses were all paid for by the prince's mansion. He didn't have any family wealth to show off. Thinking of this, Yao Qinggu looked at Qin Huaiyuan's gentle smile and understood even more. This guy's meaning should be, since you can't take out the money to express your gratitude, then treat my daughter better, right? Had the news of what happened on the walkway really spread out? Yao Qinggu felt a little embarrassed, as if he had been ruthlessly slapped in the face by 3,000 taels of banknotes. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. As expected of an old fox who had rolled around in the imperial court. On the surface, the meaning of his words was clear. Even if his words were recorded on paper, the people who saw it wouldn't think much of it. They would only think that he was a very good father-in-law, a qualified father, and even a very soft and gentle in-law. However, when combined with his tone and expression, his words didn't mean the same thing. It was very easy for people to understand the several layers of meaning behind his words. Unfortunately, he couldn't find any words to refute it, and he couldn't repeat his words to Pang Shao. Because if he said it, perhaps Pang Shao would think that he was sowing discord as a grandfather. Yao Qinggu felt that he wasn't stupid and was dignified enough. Who knew that after being scolded by the little lass and having no choice but to put out his cigarette, the little lass's father would come knocking on his door to slap him in the face. Now that a few slaps had come, he had no choice but to accept it. If he kept the money and it spread, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to explain it clearly in the future. He wouldn't be able to explain it to Dai Fu. The smile on Yao Qinggu's face was about to stiffen. He could only sullenly push the banknotes back to Qin Huaiyuan and say, "Sister Yi is a good girl. It's Dai Fu's fortune that she took a fancy to him. Ever since she married into the family, our family has liked her very much. Her maternal grandmother dotes on her as if she were the apple of her eye. This time, she went out with us and lost a lot of weight. I also feel guilty in my heart. I've always felt that I've let Sister Yi down, and I've also let you down, in-law. Your family's friendly daughter married into the family, but the current situation in the imperial court is like this. However, don't worry. Our family definitely won't lack Sister Yi's food and clothing. You should take back the 3,000 taels. Isn't it normal for a family to live together? If you still say that it's not considered rent, wouldn't it be too distant?" Qin Huaiyuan smiled and shook his head, pushing the banknotes back. "I know old Master Yao's good intentions, but the rent must be paid. I also know that old master, old madam, and in-law are all honest and kind people. They definitely won't take my rent. However, there's no harm in settling the account. I originally wanted to calculate the rent and then pay extra money. However, I expected that Wang Yi wouldn't take the less than 100 taels a year. Therefore, I directly put these banknotes here with old Master Yao. Qin Huaiyuan stood up and said with a smile, "Old Master Yao has worked hard today, so I won't disturb you anymore. Sister Yi is pregnant now. She's a little girl and doesn't know how to behave. If she offends you in any way and refuses to listen to you, just tell me. I'll go back and teach her a good lesson." The money had been paid, and the family Qin didn't owe the Wang mansion anything. Moreover, the family Qin's daughter was the princess consort and the mistress of the Wang mansion. No matter what, it wasn't their turn to bully the mistress of the family. The family Qin had paid the rent. Had the Yao family paid the rent? In the future, if there was any dissatisfaction, just tell him. Don't make things difficult for a pregnant woman. Qin Huaiyuan cupped his hands and turned to go out without waiting for Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan to speak. Yao Qinggu looked at the 3,000 taels banknotes on the table, his face turning red and then white. The Yao clan's face turned red. They gritted their teeth and said, "Father, what do you think he means? The daughter he raised didn't abide by the virtue of a woman. How can he have the nerve to criticize us so righteously?" Chapter 577. Father, what do you mean? The Yao clan was a little confused. Yao Qinggu put the banknotes into his arms, picked up the opium pipe, and slowly filled it with tobacco. The biggest problem now is that the baby in the Qin clan's belly may not be the Dai Fu's. The Yao clan was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly understood. His face was a little pale. "Father, you mean," Yao Qinggu smoked, squinted, and didn't say anything. The Yao clan sat on the edge of the Kong and was lost in thought. After a while, he said, "If the Dai Fu knows about this, can't you do a clean job and not let the Dai Fu know about it? The baby in the girl's belly is of unknown origin, and it will be troublesome if it is born. Since the family Qin is strong, and the Dai Fu needs a father-in-law, the marriage was granted by your majesty, and we can't abandon the Qin clan. Then let her be clean and have a baby whenever she wants. We can guarantee that she will have a baby in the future. But, the girl is not even 18 years old. At this age, if she is hurt and can't have a baby in the future, what will happen? Will the Dai Fu never have a concubine in his life?" The Yao clan looked at Yao Qinggu's kind and gentle face, and the hesitation in his heart gradually turned into determination. "Father, you are right. As a mother, I must be responsible for my son. I can't let the Dai Fu's bloodline be unknown. I will think of a way. Father, you. Madam Dowager is back." The voice of a maidservant came from outside. The Yao clan immediately shut up. In a breath, Mrs. Ma lifted the curtain and walked in quickly. She frowned and asked directly, "Where is the banknote?" "Mother." The Yao clan stood up. Yao Qinggu was also a little surprised. When he was about to ask the Yao clan how they knew, the opium pipe in his hand was taken away by Mrs. Ma. Mrs. Ma knocked the ash in the pipe into the spittoon, and then held one side of the pipe with one hand, raised her leg and fiercely stamped on it. With a crack sound, the jade pipe and the brass opium pipe were split into two. Mrs. Ma angrily threw the pipe on the ground. "Smoke it. Are you crazy?" Yao Qinggu suddenly stood up. Yao Shi also came over to advise her, "Mother, what are you doing? Everything was fine, why did you take out father's cigarette? Get out of here and kneel down." Ma Shi raised her hand and slapped her, causing Yao Shi's face to tilt to one side. A red handprint quickly appeared on her cheek. Yao Shi covered her face and looked at Ma Shi in disbelief. "Mother, why did you hit me?" "That's right, I hit you. You wicked, wicked girl. Don't you understand what I tell you? Look at what you two are doing today. Mrs. Ma pushed the Yao clan to the side and pointed at Yao Qinggu. Surnamed Yao, I know what you're thinking. I've been with you for decades, and I know what kind of shit you're going to do. Let me tell you, don't cause any more trouble for me. Return the money to the in-laws as soon as possible. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impatient. Surnamed Ma. Yao Qinggu was also furious and slammed the table loudly. You're trying to turn the world upside down. Don't forget who's in charge of this family. Charge? Are you trying to say that you're in charge? This is the prince's mansion. Men are in charge of external affairs and women are in charge of internal affairs. The one in charge of external affairs is Dai Fu, and the one in charge of internal affairs is the princess consort and Who do you think you are? Put away your filthy thoughts. I've been honest and upright all my life, but I actually married a wicked person like you. How am I wicked? I'm thinking for Dai Fu, and I'm afraid that he'll raise a child for free. Is there anything wrong with that? Dai Fu isn't a fool. How could he not know whether that child is his own child? Other people are overjoyed to have a great-grandson and live under the same roof as their in-laws. How wonderful would that be? But when it comes to you two, it's like your nose is your nose and your eyes are your eyes. Sister Yi went out with Dai Fu to help with the disaster this time. Do you know how much of her dowry money was used? If it weren't for that money, your majesty might have already dealt with our Dai Fu. Our in-laws ordered people to protect us and hide us these days, and you actually want 3,000 taels of silver from them. Are you still human? I didn't take it. He gave it to me. Besides, why do we have to hide? Didn't Dai Fu go out to look for Qin's daughter? Shouldn't he be protecting us? Bullshit. Don't you know why Sister Yi was kidnapped? The family Qin hasn't blamed us yet, but you're acting like this. Has your mother's brain been kicked by a donkey? Madame Ma was so angry that she slapped down. The Kong table was directly smashed into pieces. The table was broken into several pieces, and the legs of the table were also broken. Compared to Yao Qinggu's slaps just now, it was as powerful as it was in the past. It could be imagined that if this slap hit someone, it would at least break their bones and tendons. Madame Ma pointed at Yao Qinggu's nose. You, surnamed Yao, are not a good person. You're wicked, and the daughter you raised knows how to climb into the master's bed at a young age. You're 40 years old and still don't know anything. You're competing with your daughter-in-law. What kind of dogs are you two? Yao Qinggu was scolded until his face turned red. He pointed at Madame Ma with a trembling finger. He wanted to refute but couldn't find the right words. It was even more impossible for him to fight back. In his life, he had never won against Madame Ma. At this time, Madame Ma had already grabbed his lapel and pulled out the 3 banknotes. I'm going to return the banknotes to the in-laws. I'm warning you, don't try to trick me. I just told Dai Fu that in a while, I'll move my luggage and live in Si Qing Garden until my great-grandson is born. If you have any ideas, be careful that I'll peel off your skin. You prodigal old woman. How can you, an old woman, live in your grandson's courtyard? Do you think I'll harm the Qin clan? Yao Qinggu's heart was pierced by these words. His face turned red as he straightened his neck and roared. Madame Ma sneered, I've lived with you for a lifetime. Do you think I don't know you? You're also someone who has half of your body buried in the earth. Isn't it good to enjoy your old age? Why are you meddling in Dai Fu's affairs? And you? She turned around and grabbed Yao Qinggu's collar and lifted him up. During this period of time, go to the side room and reflect on yourself. You're not allowed to come out without my permission. If you dare to go to see Qin Garden, I'll break your legs. Madame Ma put one hand on her waist and grabbed Yao Qinggu's collar with the other hand. She dragged him to the side room and loudly ordered the servants to close the door. She also said to the nanny beside her, "Your old madam has hysteria. In order to prevent her from suddenly hurting people, let her recuperate in the side room. When she becomes a normal person, she can come out." The mama had been waiting outside the door for a long time and had clearly heard the conversation inside. Yao Shi was normally dignified and gentle, but in reality, she did not treat the servants as people. Seeing that the old madam wanted to punish Yao Shi, she happily nodded her head and said, Old madam, for a woman of this age, her body is weak. She sweats during the night and gets angry at the slightest thing. There are quite a few that have hysteria. Later, we must find a good imperial physician to take a good look at old madam." Madame Ma nodded and turned back to point at Yao Qinggu. The threat was obvious, and she turned around and left. Yao Qinggu leaned against the door frame and trembled. He originally thought that although his wife was a daughter of the Jianghu, she was willing to accompany him to suffer. It could be said that she was deeply in love with him and he respected her very much. When he first opened the restaurant, he was only in charge of researching the dishes, while Madame Ma was in charge of managing everything. The restaurant's business was good because she knew how to win people over. Even if a robber came, Madame Ma could deal with him with a few punches and kicks. Yao Qinggu was very satisfied with having a powerful wife. She was really good in the hall and the kitchen, not to mention that their grandson was Wang Yi now. But who would have thought that after being an old couple for a lifetime, they would fall out with each other for an outsider? Yao Qinggu was angry, wronged, and depressed. He grabbed his hair and sighed, and squatted on the ground. At this time, Qin Yining had just taken a dose of miscarriage prevention medicine prepared by Bing Tang and felt much better. She leaned against the soft satin pillow and stared blankly at the picture of 100 children and 1,000 grandchildren on the bed curtain. Pang Xiao sat beside her and asked cautiously, "Do you feel better?" "Much better." Qin Yining smiled. Although she was full of anger, Pang Xiao didn't do anything wrong. She wasn't a stupid woman who threw a tantrum at her man. She knew when and where to maintain her image and position in Pang Xiao's heart. She leaned forward with her elbows on her body and then lay down again with her head on his thigh. Pang Xiao hurriedly pulled the thin quilt for her and gently smoothed her messy long hair. "Sister Yi, don't be angry. I didn't handle the matter well this time. My grandfather and mother really thought too much. I'll explain it to them later. Don't worry too much. We don't need rent or anything like that." "I know." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I said it in a moment of anger. Now that I think about it, I feel regretful. I shouldn't have treated old master and mother-in-law like that. Look, you don't even call them grandfather and mother." Qin Yining smiled and said, "They don't treat me as family either. They suspect me." Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were smart people. How could they not see this? Looking at Qin Yining's tired face, they thought about how she had been suffering since the day she was with him. She didn't have a day of peace. Now that she was pregnant, her family even suspected her. Pang Xiao felt guilty and angry. He patted her shoulder helplessly and said, "Sister Yi, no matter what other people think, you and I are husband and wife. I believe in you and I know you. As for going to them, I'll explain it to them. I won't let something like today happen again. Don't be sad, okay?" Qin Yining nodded. A strand of long hair fell from her shoulder, down her snow-white neck, and scattered on Pang Xiao's leg. She looked so weak, and Pang Xiao's heart ached even more. He hated that he couldn't dig out his heart for her. "Okay, you have a good rest. I'm going out for a while. I'll be back soon." Qin Yining knew that he was going to Pine Crane Hall, so she moved back and watched him go out with a smile. Then she gradually stopped smiling and lay back down. She wasn't a weak person. Back then, the Sun clan didn't treat her well. She endured it because the Sun clan was her biological mother. The Yao clan and Yao Qinggu suspected her. They drew a clear line between them. Although she was shocked at the time, she felt that it was human nature. There was nothing she couldn't understand. When she was young, she saw the selfish and ugly side of people. The Yao clan and Yao Qinggu weren't bad people. They were just the most honest people. The Ma clan was sincerely good to her, so she returned the sincerity 100 times. Chapter 578. Head of the family. The news that the family Qin had all moved into the prince's mansion had already been sent to the palace by secret agents. Li Guanwen presented the secret report with both hands and then stood in the corner with his head bowed. Li Qitian opened the secret report and scanned the contents. His fists gradually tightened as he clenched the paper in his fist. The veins on the back of his hand bulged as he threw the blue and white porcelain brush holder on the table to the ground. Impudence! The porcelain shattered on the marble floor, and the sharp, ear-piercing sound of shattering and roaring mixed together, making everyone tremble in fear. Li Guanwen and the palace attendants all trembled as they knelt down with their foreheads pressed to the ground. "Your Majesty, please calm your anger." Li Qitian's eyes stared straight as he thought back to how his enemy had become his son-in-law, not missing a single detail. He suddenly realized that he had been tricked. He had been tricked by Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan. Li Qitian was so angry that his face turned purple, especially when he thought back to when he had announced the marriage at the court assembly. Li Qitian felt like he was a puppet being played with. When he had been so proud, he did not know how many people had laughed at his stupidity behind his back. He was an emperor, the ruler of a country. His existence should have been revered by everyone, but now he realized that he had become a fool that could be deceived in the eyes of others. At that time, there must have been many officials secretly laughing at him, but he had always thought that his image was very high. Li Qitian's face alternated between white and red. He felt like he had been slapped dozens of times. Perhaps Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan had already reached some kind of agreement during the Dian court. Later on, they had just used his hand to openly become a family. He had schemed and tried to obstruct them, but he had personally tied the two people who should not have formed an alliance. The most hateful thing was that he had been so proud of himself for a long time, feeling that he had completely grasped the art of balance. Laughable. How hateful. Qin Mang. You old man, how dare you trick me? Li Qitian's life in the past 2 days had not been smooth sailing. He had suffered too many blows one after another, which made Li Qitian's head throb. His temples and the back of his head throbbed. His vision went black, and he held his forehead, almost falling down. Li Guanwen watched from the side and hurriedly jumped up to support him. His voice trembled in panic. "Imperial physician, quickly call an imperial physician." Imperial physician. When the imperial bodyguards outside the door heard the noise inside, they immediately rushed in. When they saw that it was Li Qitian, they hurriedly ordered someone to go out and summon an imperial physician. The news quickly spread to the Empress and Empress Dowager's palaces. The two of them hurried over as well. The imperial study was in chaos. The scene was a complete mess. The Empress Dowager arrived before the Empress Dowager. When she saw Li Qitian fainted on the warm Kong, her eyes still showing the whites of her eyes, she fainted on the spot. The imperial physician was busy taking the Empress Dowager's pulse and found that she was pregnant. The Empress Dowager's mood was one of joy and one of worry. The palace fell into an unprecedented chaos. Even the Anyang Princess Royal's residence received the news. Li Helan also hurriedly entered the palace that night. Li Qitian had fallen ill and the court session had been cancelled for 7 or 8 days. At first, the matter could be hidden, but the officials had been waiting for a long time during the court session. When they returned home, it was inevitable that they would worry and discuss it with their family members. The inner residences had always been a breeding ground for all kinds of gossip, not to mention that the servants in the residences had 1 or 2 relatives and friends outside the residences. Therefore, the news that Your Majesty is seriously ill and that the court is about to be in chaos spread through the streets and alleys. Some people said that Your Majesty worked hard for the country and became ill from overwork. Some people said that Your Majesty failed to impeach Prince Zhongshuan and became ill from anger. No matter what other people said, the people related to this matter did not make a move. No matter if it was the Liu family that had a new head, or the family Qin and Prince Zhongshuan's residences, no one expressed their thoughts. In the study of the outer courtyard of the prince's residence, Peng Xiao invited Qin Huayuan to talk with Xiaoyu and Su Weiji. Your Majesty works hard day and night. The Taitan War is about to break out. Your Majesty is already mentally and physically exhausted. The lack of money in the national treasury is also a big worry for Your Majesty. Now that Your Majesty has arranged something that cannot be Ru-yi, it must be because of anger. As officials, we are really worried. Qin Huayuan put the report back on the table. Li Qitian probably failed to frame Peng Xiao. The war was about to break out. Not only was his national treasury empty, but the Liu family was also unwilling to help. All these things added together were enough to make Li Qitian angry. It was normal for him to be angry. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji both nodded. I only hate that I am not capable enough to share Your Majesty's worries. Peng Xiao praised Qin Huayuan's caution. Now that there were many things going on, it was important to be careful of the walls and the ears when talking in the study. He did not forget to remind them to be careful. Su Weiji said, now that His Imperial Majesty is ill, in my humble opinion, based on His Imperial Majesty's importance and trust in His Imperial Highness, you should still send a memorial to ask after him. I also plan to do so. Peng Xiao smiled and nodded. Why don't you send my regards? Qin Huayuan paused for a moment. He thought for a moment and then said, forget it. I won't send a memorial. Peng Xiao, Xiaoyu, and Su Weiji burst out laughing when they heard this. If Qin Huayuan and Peng Xiao jointly sent a memorial to ask about Your Majesty, it would probably make Your Majesty's illness even worse. Although they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, everyone still looked harmonious on the surface. Qin Huayuan, who no longer had an official position, did not need to join in the fun. Peng Xiao's memorial was nothing more than what an official should do. It was just a formality. In the palace, Li Qitian's condition had just improved. He was no longer as dizzy and dazed as before. He ordered Li Guanwen, bring in all the memorials from these past few days. Li Guanwen said hesitantly, Your Majesty, your body has just recovered a bit. The Empress Dowager has already said that you shouldn't overwork yourself. Your health is more important. Li Qitian's face was somewhat haggard. His cheekbones were also slightly protruding because of his thinness. His entire face appeared more dignified, and his eyes were gloomy and cold. At this moment, he only looked at Li Guanwen silently. Li Guanwen did not dare to persuade him again. He even secretly regretted his cheap mouth and angered Your Majesty, who was becoming more and more temperamental. Li Guanwen bowed and ordered people to bring in all the memorials that had accumulated over the past few days. Li Qitian frowned. He quickly put the memorials to the side and focused on the matters of the court. However, his eyes were sharp and he paid special attention to Peng Xiao. When he saw the memorial from Prince Zhongshuan's residence, Li Qitian hesitated for a moment before opening it. Seeing the sincere greetings written on it, Li Qitian's face became darker and darker. In his anger, he swept all the memorials in front of him to the ground. Li Qitian glared angrily. His chest heaved up and down violently. He looked like he was going to kill a few people at any time to vent his anger. Li Guanwen watched from the side in fear. He knelt on the ground and did not dare to speak. After a long time, just as Li Guanwen was hesitating whether or not he should persuade Li Qitian spoke, "Send a decree to the Lu family. We want to summon Lu Heng. If Lu Heng is not in the capital, have him quickly return to the capital for an audience. As you command, this servant will do it now." Li Guanwen immediately jogged to the Lu family to send the decree. When Li Qitian met with Lu Heng, it was already 4 days later. No one knew what Li Qitian discussed with Lu Heng. However, according to Li Guanwen's observations, Your Majesty did not show any anger towards the head of the Lu family who had once suspended the grain shipments. It could even be seen that his mood was very relaxed. Qin Yining had taken Bing Tang's pregnancy stabilizing medicine for a few days. Her body was still weak, but she could feel that her spirit was much better than before. She was watching Xian Yun, Bing Tang, and Lian Xiaozhou doing needlework around the square table when she saw Ji Yun come in. She said hesitantly, "Wang Fei. What's the matter?" Qin Yining rested her head on her arms and looked at her with her head tilted. Ji Yun hesitated for a moment before saying, "I heard that the current head of the Lu family, Second Master Lu, was summoned by Your Majesty and is very favored by Your Majesty. However, I'm afraid that the Lu family's Grand Secretary is not doing well now." Qin Yining sat up straight and said worriedly, "I heard that Grand Secretary Lu's health is not good." "How is his situation not good now?" "That's right. Grand Secretary Lu was already in the spring and autumn period. When second young Master Lu went missing, the Lu family went through a lot of changes. Grand Secretary Lu was worried about his grandson and was summoned to see him a few times. Things at home didn't go well, so he collapsed under several attacks." Ji Yun said with some confusion, "It's just that this servant finds it strange. Now that Second Master Lu has returned safely and obtained the position of the head of the family, it should be very in line with Grand Secretary Lu's wishes. Who knew that Grand Secretary Lu's condition would worsen after hearing about it? Perhaps he was too happy and agitated?" Ji Yun did not understand, but Qin Yining knew very well. She still remembered that Lu Heng had once told her that the inheritance of the Lu family had its own rules. Every generation of the Lu family had to learn to stand on the right side, and those who were selected could only give way willingly. When Lu Heng was trapped in Xia, he already had the intention of complying with the family's choice. Therefore, Lu Heng's position had already been taken by Second Master Lu, and Second Master Lu was placed in an important position by Li Qitian. The Lu family could be considered to have stood on the right side. According to the inheritance of the Lu family, the rest of the family should have acquiesced to the status quo. However, Lu Heng returned and became the head of the family boldly. He also overturned the original cooperation between the Lu family and Your Majesty. When Grand Secretary Lu heard this news, he would probably be so angry that he would die. How could his body, which was already weak from his illness, withstand such agitation? To be honest, if not for the fact that Lu Heng had personally told her about their family's customs, from Qin Yining's standpoint, Lu Heng was the candidate for the head of the family who had been groomed by Grand Secretary Lu. Grand Secretary Lu would definitely be happy to let him take back the position of the head of the family. However, the reality was that Lu Heng had broken the inheritance of the Lu family's rules. Grand Secretary Lu would probably not be able to die in peace. Qin Yining's guess was indeed correct. Grand Secretary Lu, the former head of the Lu family, finally passed away after struggling for 10 days. Before he died, he held Lu Heng's hand and spoke to him by the bed. However, because his voice was hoarse and weak, no one knew what he said to Lu Heng. Chapter 579. Lu Heng stared blankly at Grand Secretary Lu's eyes that were losing their luster. Black blood was dripping down from Grand Secretary Lu's nostrils and mouth. Grand Secretary Lu's eyelids were half opened and his pupils were dilated. Grand Secretary Lu's skinny hand was loosening its grip on his sleeve. Lu Heng felt as if someone had dug out a piece of his heart with a knife. His eyes were sore and his head was buzzing. "Grandfather, grandfather," his voice was so hoarse that it sounded as if it had been rubbed by rough stones. His lips were moving as he called Grand Secretary Lu's name. Had he done something wrong? Had he really done something wrong? "Second Master, don't be too sad." "Yes, hang her, your grandfather is old and he will die of old age. I'm sure your grandfather will be glad to see you come home safe and sound." His family members were all trying to comfort him. But Lu Heng was still in a daze. If they had known what his grandfather had said before he died, they would not have comforted him like this. He did not know if he had done the right thing by breaking the rules of the Lu family. But the assassination attempts that he had suffered since he came back with Chao Yuqing were real. He had been hesitant at first. But after he was almost poisoned to death by the red crane and his throat was almost slit by the assassin's knife, his hesitation disappeared. He had had enough of being a stray dog these days. Ever since he left the capital to search for the treasure, he had not been able to live a peaceful life. When the Titan people were hiding here and there, driven into the desolate desert in the no-man's land, and even fell seriously ill and could die at any time, he asked himself, did he not feel any resentment at all? Why did he have to be the sacrifice? Why did his second uncle not let him go when he was already the head of the family? He had been wavering at first, but after being assassinated without hesitation and betrayed several times by his servants, he had finally become firm. Money and power were the only things in the world that would not betray him. Why did his grandfather have to be so angry? He had not sacrificed himself as per the rules of the family. Instead, he had taken down his second uncle and become the head of the family. But everything he had done had the family's interests at heart. He had reached an agreement with Li Qitian. On the premise that the family's interests were guaranteed, he could gain a more stable position. What was wrong with that? Lu Heng's mind was in a mess. He kept asking himself if he had done the right thing. But every time he asked himself a question, another voice would jump out to refute him. Kneeling in front of Grand Secretary Lu's coffin and burning paper money mechanically, Lu Heng's tears flowed down uncontrollably like a broken thread. Those who flattered him were praises for his filial piety and how sad he was for his grandfather's death. He was indeed. But what was even more heartbreaking was that he was also doing this for his own foggy future. The woman he loved was now pregnant with another man's child. He kept telling himself that he shouldn't force her, that he shouldn't fight for her, and that he should just watch her silently. But when he got the news that Qin Yining was pregnant, who could understand his confusion and sadness as if he had been struck by lightning? He had spent time with Qin Yining on the run. Because he could see her often, he had been able to persuade himself not to force it. He wanted to let go of everything and let her live a happy life with her husband. But when he was separated from Qin Yining and realized that he would probably have to live like this for the rest of his life and that he would only be able to see her occasionally at the New Year's banquet, he was heartbroken. Maybe his grandfather was right. Bastard. He was indeed a bastard. He thought that he had gotten over it, but in the end, he still couldn't. He even wanted to stay by Qin Yining's side and look at her. But how could Pang Shao allow that? He couldn't have the woman he loved. He couldn't have real family love. He had even lost his grandfather, who loved him the most. Lu Heng closed his eyes and allowed his tears to wet his face. The only things that could keep him company in this life were power and money. The funeral of the Lu family was very grand. Qin Yining was pregnant, so she couldn't attend the funeral in person. Pang Shao, however, came in person. It was July and the weather was getting hotter. Lu Heng had lost a lot of weight and his face was pale. Compared to Pang Xiao's high-spirited spirit, Lu Heng's desolation seemed to have been brought back from the desert and had not disappeared. Wang Yi. Lu Heng bowed. Pang Xiao sighed and returned Lu Heng's greeting. Brother Lu, my condolences. Lu Heng sighed. Thank you, Wang Yi. You've lost a lot of weight. Although you've been working hard for the family and are sad about Grand Secretary Lu, you have to take care of yourself. The Lu family will depend on you in the future. Pang Xiao could sense Lu Heng's feelings for Qin Yining. However, Qin Yining was his wife and she was pregnant with his child. Lu Heng had never crossed the line and had even saved Qin Yining's life in Taitan. His concern for Lu Heng was genuine. Lu Heng smiled at Pang Xiao. Blood oozed from his pale and cracked lips. Thank you, Wang Yi. I'll take care of myself. Pang Xiao nodded. He didn't mention anything about Lu Heng being at Your Majesty's place. Lu Heng looked at Pang Xiao. He couldn't resist his concern for Qin Yining. How is the princess consort? Pang Xiao narrowed his eyes and smiled. She's fine. Her mother and grandmother have moved in with us. Auntie Chow has found 2 good nannies to accompany her. Although she's a little overweight now, everything is fine. Lu Heng lowered his eyes to hide his longing and jealousy. If only Qin Yining was his woman and was pregnant with his child. Congratulations. You'll be a father in 5 months. Pang Xiao smiled. Thank you. As her uncle, don't be stingy with a big red packet. Lu Heng's heart skipped a beat. He understood what Pang Xiao meant. He couldn't help but be impressed by this man's shrewdness. He purposely said that he was the child's uncle. He was treating him and Qin Yining as siblings. This was to remind him not to have any improper thoughts about Qin Yining. Lu Heng also smiled at Pang Xiao. Of course. The two chatted for a while more and then said their goodbyes. Lu Heng looked at Pang Xiao's departing figure. His smile gradually disappeared. When Pang Xiao returned home, he first went to the study in the outer courtyard. He ordered someone to prepare hot water for a thorough wash. He changed into a new set of robes before returning to see Qin Garden. It was already early summer. Qin Yining was wearing a warm, light honey-colored jacket. She had one hand on her bulging abdomen, and the other hand was pulled by Ma Shi. Behind them were several servant girls. They were strolling around the Xiqing Garden's handrail corridor. Ma Shi nagged. You should listen to your grandmother. Even though your mother really cares for you, it's not right to not let you move. Look at the women of those large families. They often have difficulties giving birth. Otherwise, they will have no strength in the middle of giving birth. Why? Isn't it because those women live like princes all day? They aren't even willing to walk a few steps. They often want to sit in palanquins. Look at the women in the countryside. It's not that difficult to give birth. They are usually 7 or 8 months pregnant and still have to do housework. You should follow me. Walk every day. It's good for your body. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. A breeze accompanied by the fragrance of the trees blew. It brushed the loose hair that had fallen from her bun to her face. She raised her hand and pushed it aside. Grandmother is right. Pang Xiao smiled and walked closer. She held Qin Yining's other arm and said, In the future, I will teach you a few sets of fish techniques. You can practice them when you have nothing to do. They can also strengthen your body. Ma Shi also said, That's right. Once you learn them, you won't have to worry about not being able to teach Dai Fu a lesson when he is disobedient. Qin Yining was so amused that he couldn't help but laugh. Bing Tang, Lian Xiaozhou, Ji Yun, and Xian Yun, who were following behind him, also laughed. Qin Yining asked, "Did you go to see Second Master Lu today? How is his family?" Pang Xiao said, "Second Master Lu's body is fine, but he has lost a lot of weight. I can see that he has a lot of things on his mind. It seems like he is hiding a lot of things." Qin Yining nodded and said, "Their family situation is also difficult to deal with." Seeing Qin Yining frown slightly and worry on his face, Pang Xiao couldn't help but say with some jealousy, "You seem to be very concerned about him." Qin Yining smiled and said, "I am a little worried. After all, we are good friends who have gone through thick and thin together. Moreover, I feel that perhaps his grandfather's death this time also has something to do with his return to the capital. If he hadn't seized the position of family head back then and cut off the supplies, I'm afraid that we would have lost some bargaining chips during the court meeting. Regardless of whether he did it on purpose for us or not, even if he did it in passing. I also owe him a favor." Pang Xiao thought of Lu Heng's handsome and refined face, then thought of his deep affection for Qin Yining, and felt an indescribable unhappiness in his heart. However, Qin Yining was magnanimous, and it wasn't good for him to express his unhappiness, so he could only nod silently. Ma Shi listened to their conversation. Although she could guess who they were talking about, she didn't know much about the matter, so she didn't say much. She only held Qin Yining's hand and observed Pang Xiao's expression. Seeing that Pang Xiao was also silent, Ma Shi felt that the atmosphere was awkward and took the initiative to ask, "Oh right, that extremely beautiful aunt of yours is going out again?" "That's right." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. Chao Yuqing returned home last month, but the Sun clan didn't like her. After all, she felt awkward. In addition, Jing Zhi and Xiao Shui were recuperating at the farmstead outside, and their injuries were mostly healed. Chao Yuqing said that she was going to look for these people. She didn't know if Qin Huayuan had arranged something for them to do. Ma Shi smiled and said, "That's really a pretty girl." Qin Yining nodded and said, "That's right, and she's very skilled. She's an extremely loyal and chivalrous woman." "Is that so? I really didn't see that." Ma Shi was surprised, and then she was eager to give it a try. "When she comes back, I'll let her spar with this old woman. I have nothing to do, and my bones are getting lazy. There's no point in fighting with the people around Daifu." The people around Pang Xiao were only accompanying Ma Shi to spar with her. Who would dare to fight with her? Qin Yining couldn't help but smile and nod. "If grandmother likes it, I'll tell Aunt Chow later." As the two of them chatted, Pang Xiao, who was listening from the side, felt less conflicted. At this moment, Huzi strode to the entrance of the courtyard and bowed to Qin Yining. Then he said, "Wang Yi." Pang Xiao knew that Huzi had something to say, so she took the initiative to walk out of Si Qin Garden. Chapter 580. Pang Xiao walked in front with his hands clasped behind his back. Huzi followed behind him and said in a low voice, "We just received news that Your Majesty has conferred the title of Zhong Yiba to Second Master Lu. The imperial edict was just sent to the Lu family." Pang Xiao did not show any surprise on his face. When he thought of Lu Heng's expression and attitude when he saw him today, it was as if he already had this premonition in his heart. He was not very familiar with Lu Heng, and they were rivals in love. Therefore, other than lamenting that there were no eternal feelings between people, only eternal interests, he did not have any other emotions. However, when he thought that Qin Yining might be troubled by this matter, he felt uncomfortable in his heart. Seeing Pang Xiao frown, Huzi carefully asked, "Master, should we tell the princess consort about this?" Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows. Seeing Huzi's clever appearance, he couldn't help but smile. "What do you think?" "If it were up to me, of course we would tell her." The princess consort is not someone who thinks too much about an insignificant problem. She can see through everything. Moreover, if she doesn't know about this matter, she might still think of them as friends. If she is careless and says something, it would be bad. You are so clever. Pang Xiao smiled and said, go watch outside. Didn't Li and the others say that they are coming today? Huzi smiled and nodded in agreement. Then he smiled and said, this time, it is all thanks to Prince Consort Ji. If it weren't for him, Li, Chao Hemming, and the others would still be tied up in the Tiger Army. The higher-ups would think that they are in the way and would not put them in an important position. They would not have a chance to do their best. If they lost their official positions and regained their freedom to work by your side, we would be able to be like before. Pang Xiao nodded and waved his hand for Huzi to go pick them up. Thinking of Ji Ziyu's arrangements that day, Pang Xiao felt very grateful. Ji Ziyu was a smart man. At critical moments, he could always use all kinds of conditions to create a chance for himself. This time, Ji Ziyu was put under house arrest by Li and the other 5. Not only did he successfully get past Li Qitian, but he also got his 6 trusted subordinates back to work for him. Now, he had another capable subordinate who could help him with his work. However, she had not seen Ji Ziyu for a while and did not know how he was doing. By the time Pang Xiao returned to the courtyard, Qin Yining's figure was nowhere to be seen. Pang Xiao went straight into the room. Qin Yining was leaning against a large, soft pillow on a soft couch. He was lazily flipping through a book. When he saw Pang Xiao return, he smiled and said, why did Huzi look for you just now? They were my 6 subordinates when I was serving in the Tiger Army. Now that they have been removed from their positions, I have an appointment to meet them today. Qin Yining smiled and said, this is good too. They can only be trusted by your side and can be put in important positions. In front of your majesty has to guard against them causing trouble, so he can't entrust them with important tasks. Now that both sides are not delayed, it is quite good. I think so too. Pang Xiao sat down next to Qin Yining. He put on his shoes and leaned sideways beside her. His large hand gently covered Qin Yining's bulging abdomen. He felt the little guy inside kick him. Even though it was not the first time he felt the vigorous vitality, Pang Xiao still felt surprised and curious. Sister Yi, he kicked me again. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. He said, I still have something to tell you. Tell me, Pang Xiao said seriously. Tell me everything. I will help you. Qin Yining smiled and said, when Bing Tang diagnosed me earlier, he found something. However, he couldn't see my pulse clearly, so he couldn't be sure. When Grandma went back, Bing Tang checked my pulse again and confirmed it. When he heard that it was related to Qin Yining's health, Pang Xiao's expression became unprecedentedly serious. What's going on? Can I ask Bing Tang to tell you? No need. I want to tell you this news myself. Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao with a smile. His watery eyes seemed to contain rippling waves. The smile on his lips was so soft and gentle that it could make people indulge in it. Bing Tang said that the babies in my belly might be twins. Pang Xiao was stunned when he heard this. Then, a smile gradually climbed to the corners of his eyes. His almond-shaped eyes widened. He lowered his head and looked at Qin Yining's belly in disbelief. He carefully touched it. Really? Twins? Yes. Qin Yining also held his belly in satisfaction. I also want to ask you. Have any of your ancestors or close relatives ever had twins? Pang Xiao thought for a moment. I really don't know. Grandma's family probably doesn't have twins. As for the Pang family, the situation is even more complicated. But who cares? It's good to have twins. It saves a lot of trouble. One birth is better than two births. Pang Xiao leaned on the edge of the bed childishly. The side of his face was pressed against Qin Yining's belly. He listened to the lively fetal movement and said with a smile, "No wonder I was wondering why this child was so lively. It turns out that they are brothers. They take turns to play." "Yes." Qin Yining lowered her head and looked at her increasingly round belly. She felt that things in this world were really magical. She didn't expect that she would be a mother soon. Pang Xiao leaned in front of Qin Yining and kissed her cheek. Then, he held her in his arms and sniffed and kissed her ears and neck like a puppy. "Sister Yi, you are so good." Qin Yining was tickled by his hot breath and the light pecks on her lips. She twisted her body and smiled to avoid him. "Stop fooling around." "I'm not fooling around." Pang Xiao leaned his face against her delicate shoulder and looked at her side profile. "I am really too happy and blessed. I heard that the Empress is pregnant now and Your Majesty is very happy. Now, it seems that he is not as happy as I am because my wife is much better than his wife." Qin Yining blushed and rolled her eyes at him. It turned out that men also had the desire to compete with each other. "Don't be too proud. It's fine if only we know about this. I don't plan to ask my mother. My father and mother are living with Qin Yining now. Although Qin Yining seems to be well behaved, I don't trust her character. If my mother is happy, she often speaks without thinking. If the news of Qin Yining reaches the ears of the old madam and the others, this matter will be publicized. The situation in the imperial court is tense now. Your Majesty and the Empress are very happy about being pregnant. If they hear that I am pregnant with 2 children at once, wouldn't they be angered to death? It wouldn't be good to attract disaster. It's fine if you only tell grandmother. You don't need to tell the others first. When the children are born at the end of the year, they will naturally know." Qin Yining gently pinched Pang Xiao's high nose. Her soft and slightly cold fingertips still carried a faint jasmine fragrance, causing Pang Xiao to chase after her finger and lightly bite it. "I know. It's good that this matter doesn't spread." Thinking of Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan's attitude towards Qin Yining these past 2 months, Pang Xiao's heart felt heavy. His previous carefree mood also disappeared. He sighed and hugged the person in his arms. He gently patted her back and said gently, "It's been hard on you these past few days. I know that my grandfather and mother's attitude is not right. If you see them, you just have to avoid them. I will also pay attention. Whenever they want to make things difficult for you, if I'm not home, you just have to ask grandmother to help you." Qin Yining smiled, "I'm not a soft persimmon that can be easily bullied. Also, not only can I ask grandmother to help me, my father is also home." Pang Xiao sighed again. If Qin Yining went to the Qin family, the conflict hidden under the calm surface would be torn apart. But Pang Xiao would not let Qin Yining suffer because of this. She was the one who was wronged. Could he stop her from complaining to her family? Qin Yining leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder. She held his slender hand in hers and used her fingertips to rub the calluses in his palm. "I'm just teasing you. Now that our families are living under the same roof, I have to think about how to get along in the future. Don't worry, I don't want to cause trouble at home. Also, you know my father's personality. He's used to dealing with these things." Pang Xiao said, "I know all this. I just feel that you've been wronged. My mother. Wang Yi, princess consort." Bing Tang walked in nervously from outside the door and gave Qin Yining a look. "Old madam is here." Qin Yining blinked in surprise. The Yao clan was grounded by Madame Ma, and Qin Yining had been quiet for 2 months. Was she released now? Pang Xiao patted Qin Yining's hand, stood up, and said, "Don't get up. I'll go and welcome mother in. Qin Yining nodded. After some hesitation, she waved at Bing Tang and Ji Yun. The two of them came over to help Qin Yining up and helped her put on the soft-soled embroidered shoes in the room. Ji Yun said in a low voice, "Didn't Wang Yi say that you should rest well and not get up?" Without waiting for Qin Yining to answer, Bing Tang said, "If we really don't get up, it'll be troublesome if old madam sees us. We'd rather be a little tired than let old madam find fault with us." Qin Yining chuckled. "What the two of you said happened to be what I was thinking just now. One question, one answer. That's how I answered my own question just now." Ji Yun and Bing Tang couldn't help but laugh when they heard that. In front of the door, Pang Xiao saw the Yao clan Sun He and Mi He walking over slowly. She went up to them and bowed. "Mother, you're here." Pang Xiao's etiquette was thorough, but in the eyes of the Yao clan, Pang Xiao felt that she was being estranged from them. Thinking about how she had been locked up in the wing room for the past 2 months and how the people outside talked about her, Yao clan was so angry that the roots of her teeth itched. She couldn't bear a grudge against her mother and couldn't do anything to Madame Ma, so she blamed all her anger on Qin Yining. Yao clan nodded faintly and said, "Where's your wife? I haven't seen her for 2 months. I miss her." At this time, Qin Yining had already walked to the corridor with Bing Tang and Ji Yun's hands. When she heard Yao clan's voice, she held her stomach and walked closer. She bent her knees and said, "Old madam." When Yao clan heard how she addressed her, the anger in her heart surged. However, her smile became more sincere and gentle. She went forward and held Qin Yining's hands. She looked at her stomach and said, "Io, you're 5 months pregnant, right?" Qin Yining smiled and nodded, "Yes, old madam." Chapter 581. The Yao clan's body smelled strongly of cosmetics. Unlike Qin Yining, who was used to using Bing Tang, which smelled faintly of jasmine, the Yao clan's body only smelled of rose. Qin Yining wasn't used to the smell, but fortunately, her nausea and discomfort had subsided, so she didn't show any abnormalities. After entering the room, the Yao clan looked at the elegant screen of magpies on branches. She frowned and said with disdain, "The color of this screen is not good. It's too plain. You're pregnant, so you need to see more festive colors. I'll ask someone to replace it with a better one." "Thank you, old madam. I'm used to this screen. If you change it to a new one, I won't be used to it. Just leave it there." Qin Yining smiled. The Yao clan said with dissatisfaction, "You're young and don't understand. Now that you're pregnant, the room should be more festive." "Is that so?" Qin Yining frowned in confusion and said, "But the imperial physician also said that too many vibrant colors in the room will make people uneasy in summer. The bedding used before was red, so it was removed. Now that you mention it, I don't know who to listen to." Pang Xiao said, "It's your own house. If you find it pleasing to the eye, you can live comfortably. I think that screen is good. There's no need to change it." The Yao clan was rejected by Qin Yining, and her son didn't speak up for her. She was full of anger, but it wasn't the right time to show her emotions. Yao clan didn't say anything. She affectionately held Qin Yining's arm and walked around the screen to the side hall. She pulled her to sit on the warm couch by the window. Seeing Qin Yining carefully sit down with his hands on his belly and Pang Xiao protecting her like a mother hen, the Yao clan couldn't help but feel jealous. She felt that her son was now biased towards an outsider and didn't care about his mother anymore. "Now that your body is heavy, it's inconvenient for you to walk around. Since it's inconvenient for you to come to the Pine Crane Hall in the future, I'll come to visit you more often." Qin Yining sat sideways, lowered his eyes, and said, "Old madam, whenever you come to visit, your daughter-in-law will always welcome you. Look at her sweet mouth. Yao Clan smiled and waved to Sun He and Mi He behind him, saying, I've asked them to prepare some chicken soup. It's simmered with some ingredients that are good for your body. The oil in the soup has also been filtered out. Have a taste. Mi He and Sun He carried the food box over and took out a clay pot with a cotton cloth. They opened the lid of the clay pot. Qin Yining smelled the light and fragrant chicken soup and didn't feel uncomfortable. He smiled and said, Thank you, old madam. We're family. Why are you being so courteous? Yao Clan leaned over and gently patted Qin Yining's stomach. This is the eldest grandson of our Pang family. Qin Yining stroked his stomach and smiled. He didn't say anything. This sentence made Qin Yining very uncomfortable in her heart. Could it be that if she wasn't pregnant, she wouldn't be able to afford a bowl of soup from their family? She knew that the Yao clan didn't treat her as one of their own, but when she heard the Yao clan express so bluntly that it was because of the baby in her stomach, she still felt very uncomfortable. It was an indescribable feeling. Qin Yining didn't know if others felt the same way, but she couldn't control her emotions. Sun He and Mi He went to get a small bowl and a spoon. Yao Clan personally served Qin Yining the chicken soup. Pang Xiao also pulled a chair to the side and said, Mother, get me a bowl too. It smells so good. I want to eat it too. Yao Clan glared at Pang Xiao and said angrily, How old are you? Are you fighting with your wife and son for food? You're not allowed to eat it. These are all prepared for Sister Yi. There's not much in total. If you eat it, what will your wife eat? What are you afraid of? Sister Yi doesn't eat or play. I'll help her eat some so that it won't go to waste. As he spoke, he got up and went to get the bowl of soup prepared by Yao Clan. Yao Clan quickly dodged and slapped the back of Pang Xiao's hand. Go away. Don't fight with Sister Yi. When he faced Qin Yining, he smiled kindly and said, Ignore him. Eat it while it's hot. Qin Yining smiled and took the chicken soup. He gently placed it on the square table in front of him and said, This is the time to take pregnancy stabilizing medicine. It's said to be for an empty stomach. I'll take the medicine first and use the chicken soup to change the taste in my mouth. Pang Xiao nodded, That's good. He turned around and ordered the people outside, Bring the princess consort's pregnancy stabilizing medicine. Not long after, he saw Bing Tang carrying a black wooden tray. On top of the tray was a small white porcelain bowl filled with half a bowl of black medicinal liquid. She slowly walked over to the front. Princess consort. Qin Yining picked up the medicine bowl and drank it in one gulp. That black medicine didn't smell good. Yao Clan felt that it didn't smell good when they smelled it. But now, it was drunk in one gulp. In the end, she wasn't raised in a noble family. When she was young, she was tainted with the aura of the marketplace. But she was actually so rough. She drank medicine as if she drank wine. Yao Clan lowered their heads. They thought of those noble young ladies they had seen in the Pang family. Compared to Qin Yining, they felt that they were not pleasing to the eye. When Qin Yining was taking the medicine, Bing Tang had been observing the expressions of the Yao clan. When she saw that the Yao clan looked down on Qin Yining but pretended to be gentle, she was secretly angry. Then, her gaze fell on the soup bowl on the table. In the thick aroma of the chicken soup and the delicate fragrance of chopped green onions, there seemed to be a familiar and slightly bitter taste. What was it? Bing Tang smiled and said, Old madam is so considerate. Is there anything good in this chicken soup? Yao Clan didn't expect that a little girl would dare to speak to her face. Sure enough, she wasn't a noble young lady. She didn't even know how to discipline her servants. Yao Clan cursed in her heart and was too lazy to bother with Bing Tang. Bing Tang didn't get angry, but she didn't apologize either. She only smiled and said to Qin Yining, Wang Fei, you have taken the medicine. You need to rest quietly for an hour. It's best if you don't eat anything. Otherwise, the medicine and the chicken soup will clash with your miscarriage prevention medicine. Qin Yining heard Bing Tang say what she needed now and secretly praised Bing Tang's cleverness. She said with a troubled expression, "Old Madam specially sent the chicken soup. It's still warm. It'll be a pity if I don't eat it." "Yes." Yao Clan was a little anxious and vigilant. "That medicine is quite bitter. You should at least eat a bowl of chicken soup to change the taste in your mouth." Bing Tang sneered in her heart, but on the surface, she smiled and said, "It's better not to eat it. Wait for an hour and I'll cook the chicken soup for Wang Fei. I won't let down old madam's good intentions. It's just that the medicine will clash if you eat it now." "You, impudent." Yao Clan was continuously rejected. The dissatisfaction in the letter reached its limit. Pang Xiao saw that Bing Tang was trying to stop Qin Yining from eating the chicken soup and was alarmed. She smiled and said, "It's fine. Mother, don't be angry. Sister Yi has a good appetite now. It'll be the same if the chicken soup is heated up later. I guarantee you won't let down your good intentions. It's just a small matter. Don't be so calculative with the little girl." She turned and waved at Bing Tang, "Why aren't you leaving?" Bing Tang immediately bent her knees and complied. She also moved the pot of chicken soup and the small bowl of chicken soup onto the tray. She walked away as if she was flying. The Yao clan couldn't stop her in time. Yao clan was dissatisfied and wanted to scold her. However, the Yao clan noticed that Pang Xiao was looking at her strangely. If she said anything more, it would inevitably arouse suspicion. Yao clan's mouth twitched stiffly. She squeezed out a smile and said, "It's fine. Let's rest for a while before eating. If you want to eat anything in the future, you can tell me. You can also tell me if you want to eat anything. You are now our family's hero. Don't be ashamed and treat yourself unfairly." "Thank you, old madam." Qin Yining listened to her pretending to be concerned. Her heart didn't waver at all. Yao Clan said a few more words to Qin Yining. No matter what she said, Qin Yining remained indifferent. Chapter 582. Pang Xiao felt as if his heart was being pricked by needles. He lifted Qin Yining's chin with his index finger and rubbed her delicate skin with his callous thumb. He suppressed his anger and looked into Qin Yining's eyes. His eyes gradually became soft and gentle. "Sister Yi, you are a smart person. Did you already know what they were talking about behind our backs?" Qin Yining smiled when she heard this. She hid the grievances in her heart very deeply. She looked away and said, "Mouths grow on people's bodies. How can they not allow people to speak? Don't let your imagination run wild. I don't think Madame Dowager has any malice towards me. When I returned to Qin's mansion, even my mother couldn't accept me at first. Look at us now. Aren't we no different from other mothers and daughters? I think that as long as I treat her with respect, old madam will soon treat me like other mothers-in-law." Qin Yining's requirements were really not high. She would not ask her mother-in-law to treat her like her biological daughter because that was impossible. It was hard to know what was in a person's heart. Moreover, she was not her biological daughter. How could she ask her to get rid of her selfish nature? She only wanted to live in peace with the Yao clan. She was filial and did not cause trouble for Pang Xiao. But why was it so difficult? Qin Yining sighed in her heart but did not show it on her face. She smiled and said, "All right, don't think about it." If it was someone who was not familiar with Qin Yining, they probably would not have noticed her emotions and would have been persuaded by a few words. However, Qin Yining was the apple of Pang Xiao's eye. He couldn't even bear to say a harsh word to her. He wished he could shrink her so that he could carry her in his arms all day long. How could he bear to let others bully her when he couldn't bear to bully her? Sister Yi, Pang Xiao kissed Qin Yining's forehead, nose, and finally lips. His voice was low and gentle, full of tenderness. I know you are wronged. Don't worry. This kind of thing will not happen again. Qin Yining smiled and raised her head to respond to him. However, she also knew that it was extremely difficult to put an end to this kind of thing. The other party was not an enemy, so she could not take it lightly. Although she had a good relationship with Pang Xiao, how many young couples who had a good relationship had divorced because of mishandling these things at home? Qin Yining valued relationships the most in her life. The last thing she wanted to see was a gap between her and Pang Xiao. No matter what, the Yao clan was still Pang Xiao's biological mother. She would always remember this. Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining's body. Even though she was pregnant, she didn't gain any weight. His heart ached when he touched her back. He knew that he was not a good husband. Before they were married, he had already realized that no matter which woman followed him, they would face problems in the future. He might be living a wealthy life, but she might not be living a happy life. Whenever something happened to him, she would be implicated. Moreover, the situation in the imperial court was so tense now. Ever since Qin Yining married him, she had almost never lived a peaceful life. She suffered in the disaster area and was kidnapped. She still suffered. He couldn't even imagine if Qin Yining had secretly shed tears of grievance when he wasn't around. He also didn't know how to heal her psychological wounds. He couldn't ignore Qin Yining's feelings and assume that she didn't care about anything just because she was well-behaved and strong. This time, his heart was as clear as a mirror. Qin Yining couldn't speak, and it wasn't convenient for her to speak, so he would do it. He couldn't calm the storm outside for a while. If he let her suffer at home, could he still be considered a man? Pang Xiao didn't mention this matter. He chatted and laughed with Qin Yining for a while, then called Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, and Lian Xiaozhou to accompany Qin Yining. My former subordinates are coming to the residence today. Previously, they were in important positions in the Tiger Army. This time, because of all Lan's petty tricks, they were dismissed by Your Majesty. Now, they have returned to my side. I will go and meet them now. Qin Yining naturally knew that Ji Ziyu used the house arrest incident to not only cleverly avoid Li Qitian's punishment, but also receive praise. He even sent Pang Xiao's right-hand men back to his side. With your former subordinates following you, you don't have to be restrained in doing things in the future. We still have to think of ways to thank Prince Consort Ji in the future. Go quickly. Don't worry about me. Grandmother will be back soon. With Madame Ma around, Qin Yining was protected tightly. There was nothing to be afraid of. Today, if Madame Ma and the Sun clan hadn't agreed to go out of the residence to the market to personally choose black chicken for Qin Yining to nourish his body, the Yao clan wouldn't have had the chance to come to see Qin Garden. Pang Xiao leaned over and kissed her forehead. Then, he stared at her belly for a while with eyes full of love. After that, he told Bing Tang and the others to take good care of her and turned around to leave. Qin Yining didn't know that Pang Xiao didn't directly leave Qin Garden. Instead, he went to the small kitchen to find a food box. He carried the pot of chicken soup and called for Huzi and the two tall and burly Jinghu Wei to go to Pine Crane Hall together. Although there was a large kitchen in the manor, and everyone's meals were prepared by the large kitchen, with people from each room and courtyard ordering people to carry the food boxes, ever since the Qin family moved in, because of Yao Shi's resistance, Qin Huayuan had made up his mind. The Qin family would close their doors and live on their own, setting up their own kitchen. Pine Crane Hall naturally lived their own lives here. Therefore, at this time, only people were left in the large kitchen to look after the courtyard. The small kitchen in Pine Crane Hall was larger than the kitchens in the other courtyards. Yao Qinggu used to run a restaurant. He was a chef and loved to study cooking. Pang Zhao's excellent cooking skills were influenced by his grandfather. The Yao clan's pot of chicken soup must have come from the small kitchen in Pine Crane Hall. Pang Zhao walked in front with a sullen face and didn't say a word. Huzi carried the food box and carefully followed behind him. The other two Jinghu Wei brothers also felt strange. Although they were soldiers of the prince's residence, they couldn't enter the inner residence. Pang Zhao was so angry and called them over. They vaguely felt that something was wrong. The Jinghu Wei looked at each other. They couldn't figure out what was going on and pulled Huzi's sleeve. Huzi turned around and winked at them. He didn't know what was going on either. When they arrived at Pine Crane Hall, Pang Zhao pushed open the courtyard door and went straight in. The old maidservant guarding the door was dozing off under the shade of a tree. She supported her chin with her hand and nodded little by little. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she was startled. She stood up and curtsied. "Your Highness." Pang Zhao said with a cold face, "Who are the servants in Pine Crane Hall's kitchen? Come out." Pang Zhao's sword-like eyebrows were raised, his phoenix-like eyes were filled with anger, and his face was tense. He did not pay his respects to the old master, nor did he pay his respects to the old madam. All the servant girls and biddies in the courtyard were scared stiff. Some servants went to the small kitchen to call the servants on the stove out. Some servants went in to report to Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan. Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan were discussing today's matters in the room. When they heard the servant girl's reply, the father and daughter's hearts beat wildly. They also stood in the corridor hesitantly. "Dai Fu. What's going on?" Yao Qinggu held the pipe in his hand and asked in confusion. Pang Zhao respectfully bowed to Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan. He said, "Grandfather, mother, we'll talk later as a family. I'm here to catch the spy." "Spy?" Yao clan's eyes widened in surprise. Yao Qinggu immediately understood something. His face darkened. "Dai Fu, your mother and I are living in this courtyard with a group of servants. Are you suspecting your grandfather?" "Grandfather, you must be joking." Pang Zhao narrowed his eyes and smiled. "I didn't say anything about grandfather." "Grandfather, why do you take it to heart? You know your grandson's current situation. If there is an enemy or a Tatar spy who sneaks into the prince's mansion to cause trouble and commit murder, everyone living in this mansion is our family. Who can afford to lose?" Pang Zhao took a few steps forward and walked to the four old women who were kneeling on the stove in the courtyard. He walked around them with his hands behind his back and looked at each of them clearly. Pang Zhao was angry and didn't hide his strong killing intent. The four old women broke out in a cold sweat. Their clothes and collars were soaked with sweat. If there are no spies in this mansion, then there are no spies in Pine Crane Hall. Pang Zhao's face darkened. His voice was loud and clear. This king's closest elders live in Pine Crane Hall. They are this king's mother and grandfather. If there are spies in Pine Crane Hall and try to harm this king's blood relatives, how can this king let them off easily? Yao Qinggu was angry and vexed at this time. He was angry that the Yao clan didn't use their brains and directly took a bowl of safflower chicken soup to the Qin clan. They didn't think about whose daughter the Qin clan was. How could she eat that bowl of soup in front of her mother-in-law? He was vexed that he didn't have time to control the pace of things and let Pang Zhao come to him directly. If things went wrong, he would be called an old man who was not benevolent. Otherwise, he would have a falling out with Pang Zhao. He devoted a lot of feelings to this grandson. Yao Qinggu didn't want Pang Zhao, who had always respected and loved him, to be separated from him. Yao Qinggu was in a dilemma and didn't know what to say for a while. Yao Clan had already walked down the stairs. He frowned and walked to Pang Zhao's side. He opened his sandalwood fan to block the sun and pulled Pang Zhao down the corridor with a frown. It's a hot day. Don't talk under the hot sun. Be careful not to get heatstroke. What spies are you talking about? The people in Pine Crane Hall are all old people who have followed Mother. How can there be spies? Pang Zhao pulled his hand away from Yao Clan's and stood there with a sullen face. Mother. Yao Clan's heart skipped a beat. He stopped and looked back. Mother. Who made the chicken soup for Sister E today? Chapter 583. Murderer, aren't you a murderer? Pang Zhao said in a low voice, causing the Yao Clan's unspoken words to be stuck in their throats. What do you mean by this? Murderers, be it for money, for profit, for revenge, or for love, there will always be a reason. What is your reason? You poisoned your 5-month pregnant daughter-in-law with safflower, wanted to murder your unborn grandson, and even wanted to kill your own daughter-in-law. What is your reason? The Yao Clan's eyes widened, and they were tongue-tied. Pang Zhao's voice was so low that only the Yao Clan and the 2 maids beside her could hear it. But in the Yao Clan's ears, these words were like the beating of a drum. Pang Zhao looked at the Yao Clan's tongue-tied expression, and bitterness gradually filled his heart. What are you after, HM? If my son and your grandson are gone, what good will it do you? You're talking nonsense. The Yao Clan came back to his senses, straightened his back, and retorted loudly, who told you that? Am I that deranged person? Why would I harm my own grandson? His face turned from red to white, and the Yao Clan's tears fell down. What a bastard who forgets his mother after getting a wife. Dai Fu, I carried you for 10 months, and painstakingly gave birth to you. It wasn't easy to raise you. Now that you have a wife, is this how you accuse your mother? Your wife is like a precious treasure. Are you going to accuse others just because they want to visit her? I was kind enough to give her chicken soup to nourish her body, but she turned the tables on me. She said I poisoned her with safflower. Bah! Is that kind of lowly person worthy of eating safflower? You believe everything she says, don't you have a brain? Dai Fu, let me ask you, do you still treat me as your mother? The Yao Clan was on the verge of screaming at the end. They felt that the son they raised had become someone else's. They had no hope in this life. They couldn't help but feel sad. They covered their mouths and choked with sobs. Yao Qinggu frowned. The Yao Clan's behavior was too much. Pang Zhao listened to the words of the Yao Clan, and her sad expression slowly calmed down. She sighed and said, Mother, if you didn't have a guilty conscience and didn't lose your mind, you wouldn't have made such a big mistake. I left you some face, but you just had to make a scene. If you don't mind others hearing about you, I don't mind. He lowered his voice because he didn't want things to get out of hand. Who knew that the Yao Clan would make such a big fuss out of guilt? It was as though Yao Shi's neck had been grabbed by someone, as her crying stopped. Her face went from pale white to a purple eggplant color. Yao Qinggu was angry that they didn't fight back. He sighed and said, Okay, don't wash your dirty linen in public. This matter ends here. Dai Fu, follow me into the house. He turned around and walked into the house. The Yao Clan clenched their teeth and looked at Pang Zhao. They couldn't hit or scold him. Whatever they did seemed wrong. They couldn't think of any other way, so they followed Yao Qinggu into the house. Pang Zhao wasn't as obedient as before. Grandfather, if you're tired, you can go into the house and rest. It won't be too late for me to rest after I deal with the spies in the house. He turned around and looked sharply at the people kneeling on the ground. The nannies and daughters-in-law on the stove felt their hair stand on end. Speak. Who made today's chicken soup? Yao Qinggu stood at the door and heard Pang Xiao questioning the servants. He was so angry that he couldn't help but stomp his feet. Pang Xiao obviously didn't want to let go of the troublemakers today. He wanted to deal with them in front of him. He was Pang Xiao's grandfather. If Pang Xiao did this, wasn't he looking down on him? What's more, today's matter wasn't simple. If word spread among the servants, it would be even more difficult for them in the future. Yao Qinggu's heart was in a mess. He felt as if he had been splashed with hot water. His face was burning. At this point, Yao Qinggu knew that this matter would be difficult to resolve with Pang Xiao around. The Yao clan members stood beside Yao Qinggu and looked at the scene outside the window. They were also embarrassed and worried. After cursing angrily just now, they did feel a lot better. However, the next problem for the Yao clan was whether they still wanted their son, Pang Xiao. If they did, Pang Xiao's attitude was so unyielding. As a mother, would she have to apologize to Qin Yining? If they didn't, what hope would she have left in this life? After the anger and embarrassment, the Yao clan members truly felt the crisis. They covered their mouths and cried bitterly. The courtyard was quiet. The servants were all kneeling with their heads down. No one dared to say a word. They could only respond with the sound of cicadas. Pang Xiao walked to the people in the middle and asked again, "Who made the chicken soup? Who added the red flour inside? Why did they do this? Who ordered them to do this? If you stand up now and explain to this king may spare your life. If you persist in going about things the wrong way, when this king's people find out who did it, this king can't guarantee your safety." Pang Xiao's words made everyone's hair stand on end. They raised their eyes and secretly looked at Huzi and the two Jinghu Wei in front of the courtyard. They trembled uneasily. What should they do? Could they tell the truth? If they told the truth, they might not have a place in Pine Crane Hall in the future. But if they didn't tell the truth, Wang Yi could take their lives in the blink of an eye. After weighing the pros and cons, their lives were more important. The women on the stove looked at each other and didn't know what to say. Everyone's eyes were filled with hesitation. Pang Xiao said again, "Are you going to tell the truth?" His voice was full of impatience. Obviously, his patience had run out. Yao Qinggu, who was behind the curtain, finally couldn't stand it anymore. He shouted outside, "Dai Fu, come here." If he let Pang Xiao continue to interrogate him, he would be dragged out and lose face. It would be better for him to explain to Pang Xiao and let him understand his painstaking efforts. It would also prevent the relationship between grandfather and grandson from becoming strained. When Pang Xiao heard Yao Qinggu's call, his thin lips gradually pursed and his fists gradually clenched. After coming to Pine Crane Hall today and analyzing the Yao clan's false bravado and Yao Qinggu's performance, how could Pang Xiao not understand? It turned out that the people who wanted to harm Sister Yi were his own mother and grandfather. He had to guard against others outside, but at home, did he have to alienate his family? If he didn't guard against them, would he lose his wife and child? Pang Xiao's heart was filled with grievance and anger. He ordered Huzi in a deep voice, "Interrogate them one by one and wait for this king's judgment." "Yes." Huzi and Jinghu Wei immediately responded. They rubbed their hands and called the maidservants to the entrance of the courtyard to interrogate them one by one. Pang Xiao entered the main room. Yao Qinggu withdrew his gaze from the window. His beard trembled as he said, "Why don't you tell your people to stop? In order to catch the spy, interrogations are necessary. I know that grandfather is a kind person and can't bear to see the people around him being wronged. However, for the safety of our entire residence, we can't do anything less." Pang Xiao smiled at Yao Qinggu and said gently, "Grandfather, what do you want to say to me? Yao Qinggu's face was already red. He looked at Pang Xiao for a while and then said, "Don't let them interrogate you. Don't wash your dirty linen in public. To tell you the truth, I asked your mother to do what she did today." Pang Xiao's suspicion was confirmed by Yao Qinggu. He didn't feel sad or shocked anymore. "I don't know why grandfather did this." Yao Qinggu didn't feel relieved when he saw that Pang Xiao didn't fly into a rage. Instead, he became more nervous. "Dai Fu, your mother and I are doing this for your own good. Your wife is a good woman, no one can deny that. But she was kidnapped by the Titan after all. Who knows what she experienced outside? Who can be sure that the child in her belly is your child? I don't want to see such a woman sullying you by your side. I don't want such a person to sully your bloodline." Pang Xiao was so angry that he burst into laughter. The laughter became louder and louder, revealing a bit of arrogance and ridicule. Yao Qinggu and Mrs. Pang saw Pang Xiao like this. The worry in their hearts didn't lessen. Instead, they became even more nervous. After a while, Pang Xiao said, "Grandfather, you and mother are both my elders. I won't comment on your character. But I can tell you. I can't be sure if my wife is chaste or not. What's more, she was kidnapped because of me. Even if something happened to her, I won't dislike her. On the contrary, I don't like those who dislike her because of this. As for the child, I've already said it clearly. How long has it been since I reunited with her? How many months has it been since she gave birth to our child? Grandfather, mother, and I can't even figure out if her child is mine." "Okay, you cannot believe me. You can also not believe Sister E. I can't persuade you to change your mind. But can this be the reason why you poisoned my wife with saffron? Grandfather, mother, if it weren't for the two of you today, I would definitely cut up the person who wanted to harm Sister E and my child. But it just had to be you." Pang Xiao turned around and no longer looked at Yao Qinggu and Yao Clan. "Since you looked down on my wife, that means you looked down on me. You wanted to kill my child, so I can't take revenge on you, nor can I do anything to you. But from now on, I'll live my own life, so please don't interfere. You just have to live your own life." Pang Xiao didn't give Yao Qinggu and Yao Clan a chance to preach at all. He turned around and left the main room. In the courtyard, Pang Xiao pointed at the old women on the stove and the maidservants serving in Pine Crane Hall. These people are suspected of being spies. However, the law can't punish the masses. This king is not a ruthless person. You have worked hard to serve Old Master and Madame Dowager. So, each of you will be rewarded with 2 taels of silver. After paying your monthly salary, you can leave the mansion." "Wang Yi!" The servants exclaimed and looked at Pang Xiao in disbelief. They didn't expect that Pang Xiao would drive away all the servants in Pine Crane Hall. Yao Clan was anxious when they heard this. They hurriedly lifted the curtain and came out. "Dai Fu, you can't do this. Xuanhe and Mai have been following me for a long time. And Zhao Kun's family, they don't know how to dissuade Madame Dowager from doing stupid things. This king didn't punish them. He just gave them money to dismiss them. It's already very benevolent." Pang Xiao's eyes were full of alienation. Chapter 584. Pang Xiao looked at Yao Clan's incredulous eyes, smiled and said, "I'll call you old madam. Just like those rich families, I'll directly call you by your identity instead of using familial ties. Do you think this is more satisfactory? Did this king neglect you? What are you talking about? You heartless thing, is this how you treat your own mother?" Pang Xiao sneered, "If it was an outsider who wanted to harm my wife and kill my child, I would have already wrung his head off. I've already been polite enough to you. Old madam. Yao Clan's tears fell down, wetting a large part of her clothes. You're really going to distance yourself from me? For an outsider, you. Old madam, please don't use the shrew skills you learned in the marketplace on me. Don't try to act shamelessly. You put safflower in the chicken soup for your daughter-in-law, and you want to kill your grandson. Even those shrews in the marketplace wouldn't do such a vicious thing. You're my mother, and I've always been affectionate to you. But you want to kill my child, and you don't have any affection for me. In the future, I can only call you old madam, and take care of you until you're old. That's the limit of what I can do. You. Yao Clan was so angry that she couldn't breathe. Pang Shao was her life's hope. Yao Clan never thought that Pang Shao would actually disregard her opinion and say such heart-wrenching words for an outsider. Yao Qinggu saw that Pang Shao was serious, and his heart was shocked and angry, but more than that, he felt regret. In fact, this matter really shouldn't have developed like this. If there was anyone to blame, it was Yao Clan's stupidity. She directly brought a bowl of chicken soup with safflower in it, and let everyone know that she was the one who did it, and they didn't even have a chance to defend themselves. Dai Fu. Yao Qinggu tried to smooth things over. You're already so old, you should be more sensible. No matter how bad your mother is, she's still your biological mother. She gave birth to you and raised you. Isn't it wrong for you to hurt her because of someone else? Old master. Pang Shao looked at Yao Qinggu. I understand what you mean. But please understand that I'm doing this for the sake of your kindness. Otherwise, if someone else dared to kill my child and wife, would have turned hostile long ago. Hearing that Pang Shao had changed the way she addressed him, Yao Qinggu's face instantly turned pale. His beard trembled as his lips trembled. The servants of Pine Crane Hall knelt on the ground, all dumbstruck. After sorting out the cause and effect, they finally understood that they were just fish in the pond that got caught in the fire. The real culprits were their old master and old madam. They were the masters that they served loyally. Chapter 585. Yao Qinggu was like an old hen protecting its chicks. He opened his arms and shielded the Yao clan behind him. His old hand held the newly repaired brass jade mouth tobacco pipe and pointed it at Mrs. Ma. Don't take advantage of your kung fu to get physical with us. This is your daughter. How can you side with an outsider? Your heart is always with another family. Ma Shi's face was red with anger. Gritting her teeth, she pointed at Yao Qinggu. She wanted to scold him, but when she met Yao Qinggu and Yao Shi's eyes, she swallowed her words. I'm too lazy to reason with a group of evil people like you. I'm speaking human language. Do you understand human language? Mrs. Ma turned around and took Pang Zhao's hand. Dai Fu, let's go. Don't pay attention to them in the future. They are both evil and heartless. In the future, you have to be more careful about Yi's clothes, food, housing, and transportation. Don't let them go to see Qin Garden. Pang Shao saw that his grandmother was so angry. He was afraid that the anger would affect her health, so he nodded and comforted her. Okay, Grandma, let's go first. Yao Qinggu loved his grandson, Pang Shao, the most. Like the Yao clan, he counted on Pang Shao. Now that he saw that Pang Shao didn't say a word for him, he was disappointed. Thinking of Mrs. Ma's various bully behaviors, he felt that he had suffered enough in his life. Every time something didn't make sense, Mrs. Ma would use violence to suppress it, making him lose his dignity. Today, Pang Shao came to the door. Mrs. Ma was originally his wife, but she stood on the side of outsiders. Yao Qinggu was furious. He pointed at Mrs. Ma and shouted, "If you dare to step out of this place, you will be removed from the Yao family's genealogy in the future." I don't have such an arrogant and domineering wife like you. Mrs. Ma turned around angrily and sneered. If you have the guts, you should have divorced me long ago. I can live a more carefree life in this life. Now you're sick of her and want to divorce her. Fine, you can write the divorce papers now. Then take your Yao family's genealogy book and your precious daughter back to the Yao family's territory. I'll stay here with my grandson. You. Yao Qinggu was so angry that he fell backwards. Right if you have the guts. If you don't, then you're not a man. I'm waiting for you to send the letter of divorce. Mrs. Ma pulled Pang Zhao's hand and walked out without looking back. Yao Qinggu stood in the yard and stared at the backs of Mrs. Ma and Pang Zhao as they left. After Pang Zhao's people left, the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu finally felt the silence in the courtyard. Only the two of them were left in the pine crane hole. Yao Qinggu put his hands on his waist and breathed heavily. He kept muttering, "Outrageous, outrageous." Then he looked at the crying Yao clan and said angrily, "Look at what you've done." Yao clan felt even more wronged when he heard this. He sobbed and cried, "It was father who told me to get rid of the Qin clan's child. Why are you blaming me? I told you to do it, but who told you to go with a bowl of medicine? Can't you use your brain? Why don't you just go and kill him with a knife? What did you do? It was obvious that you did it. Now you can't even deny it. What else can you do?" Yao clan was punched by Mrs. Ma. His back still hurt. After being reprimanded by Yao Qinggu, he felt even more wronged. He wanted to quarrel with Yao Qinggu, but he felt his chest tighten. He rolled his eyes and fainted. Pang Zhao was standing in front of the study in the outer courtyard. He heard people talking back and forth. Old madam fainted. He said helplessly and anxiously, "Then go and get a doctor. Choose a few sensible old people to serve old master and old madam in the pine crane hole. Their standard of living will be the same, but their movements must be reported to me." Huzi heard this and immediately went to tell the steward of the prince's mansion to make arrangements. Pang Zhao went into the study and talked with the 6 generals of the Tiger Army. Qin Yining didn't know what happened at the pine crane hole. Under Pang Zhao's orders, no one dared to disturb a pregnant woman in front of Qin Yining. Mrs. Ma returned to see Qin Garden and ordered people to make black chicken soup for Qin Yining as usual. When Pang Zhao returned to the courtyard in the evening, the atmosphere was harmonious. Qin Yining asked about the 6 people. Pang Zhao hugged her and lay on the soft couch. He sat behind her and acted as her pillow. His deep voice came from behind her ear. His warm breath blew on her ear and neck. The 6 of them are now innocent. They remember the friendship we had when we fought side by side in the past. I investigated and found that they are indeed trustworthy. So I arranged for 2 of them to go to the northern border. As for the other 4, I want to arrange for them to go to the south. Qin Yining tilted her head. Ever since her belly became big, she would feel stuffy after lying down. Pang Zhao hugged her from the most comfortable angle. The human-shaped pillow behind her was too comfortable. His voice was too gentle. Qin Yining felt a little drowsy and her voice became coy. Go to the south. Where? Nanyan. Pang Zhao held one of her hands and played with it. He said, I remember that you had a lot of good farmland and land around the old capital of Dian. Qin Yining responded lazily. Her thoughts turned and she immediately woke up. She said in surprise, You want to arrange for them to go to the south to recruit soldiers and buy horses? Pang Zhao looked down at Qin Yining in his arms. He kissed her on the cheek in surprise and praise. So smart. Why do you want to recruit soldiers and buy horses when I mentioned the good farmland and land in the south? Qin Yining chuckled. I'm the person who sleeps beside you. How can I not know your personality? Qin Yining's drowsiness was swept away. She narrowed her eyes and thought carefully. She nodded and said, I think this method is feasible. Although we are loyal to your majesty, we can't completely not consider a way out. Your majesty doesn't trust you now. We don't know when something big will happen. It's right to prepare for both sides. She thought for a moment and said, I haven't seen Master Zhong in public for a long time in order to hide it from others. When I return, I will give you the accounts of Master Zhong. You can use the money under my name. You can negotiate with Master Zhong directly. Just be careful not to let your majesty's people know. Pang Xiao was truly moved by Qin Yining's unreserved trust. Qin Yining's land and farmland were all obtained by her when she was doing good deeds for the people. Under her management, it had snowballed and became an existence that couldn't be ignored. It could be said that Qin Yining's wealth was equivalent to half of the wealth of de Zhou's aristocratic families combined. Not to mention de Zhou's national treasury, which was cleaner than their faces. She had such a large amount of wealth, but she had always hidden it. Only when he needed disaster relief, she would use the dowry as an excuse to donate money to help the people do practical things. Now, she had given him her biggest trump card without holding anything back. Pang Xiao was moved. He kissed her on the cheek again and pulled her into his arms. He rested his chin on her forehead. Sister Yi, don't worry. I won't use your money to do evil. In the future, if I need to use any money, I will contact Master Zhong first and tell you first. Qin Yining laughed when he heard this. I know you're not that kind of person. Although you were known as the god of evil in the early years, and there were people who exaggerated your evil appearance, saying that you were like a man-eating devil, but I know that you have a heart that loves the people as your own children. You won't disregard the lives of ordinary people for your own benefit. That's why I gave you this money. I know that you will use it for the right things and not for evil. I believe that everything you've done is for the sake of the common people. Pang Xiao was in a high position. Whether it was in front of outsiders or in front of his aides, he had received too many praises. However, no one's praise could compare to Qin Yining's words. She understood him, trusted him, and supported him. This made Pang Xiao feel that everything he did was meaningful and worth it. Even if the people in the world didn't understand him and thought that he was a fiend, at least Qin Yining would understand him. Pang Xiao closed his eyes and patted Qin Yining's back with his large hand. He resisted the sudden sourness in his eyes and said in a dry and hoarse voice, with a wife like this, what more can a husband ask for? Qin Yining chuckled and said, same to you. The husband and wife looked at each other and smiled. At this time, the big and small things in life didn't seem to be important to Qin Yining. No matter what Pang Xiao's mother and grandfather thought or did, at least her man trusted her wholeheartedly and protected her. Why should she care about people who didn't matter to her? Why should she rush to get close to people who didn't like her? All these didn't matter. As long as her family was safe and sound, that was the greatest blessing. Qin Yining's mentality was very calm. Therefore, the red flower incident this time didn't hurt her body. On the contrary, Ma Shi treated Qin Yining more attentively and considerately. Qin Yining felt flattered and treated Ma Shi more wholeheartedly. Qin Huayuan and the Sun clan saw how well Ma Shi treated Qin Yining and were happy in their hearts. When their daughter was in front of them, she didn't have a good life. But when she was in Pang Xiao's family, she was treated like a treasure and protected. Although the Sun clan felt sour in their hearts, they felt more regret and gratification. The hot days of July gradually passed. In August, the heat in the capital reached a new height. Qin Yining's belly was 6 months pregnant, but because she was pregnant with twins, her belly was about the same as an ordinary 7-month pregnant belly. Qin Yining held the hands of the Sun clan and Ma Shi and walked under the shade of the trees in Si Qin Garden. She was so hot that her temples and neck were covered in sweat. The Sun Clan said worriedly, "It's so tiring to be pregnant on such a hot day. It's a pity that there aren't any good places around the capital for you to avoid the heat." Madame Ma also said, "I think Sister Yi's belly is much bigger than a normal 6-month pregnant woman's belly. We usually have Bingtang take care of her. Should we find an imperial physician who is good at taking care of her?" At this point, Musher suddenly realized that her words might cause Qin Yining to misunderstand because the Yao clan and Yao Qinggu's deeds were still vivid in her mind. She hurriedly said, "Elas, don't think too much. I'm just afraid that you have some symptoms." Chapter 586. Qin Yining originally didn't want to make it public because she was weak when she was 4 months pregnant and the fetus was unstable. Your Majesty was jealous. At that time, the Empress had just found out that she was 1 month pregnant. It was really inappropriate for Pang Xiao to spread the news that the princess consort had twins. She was afraid that it would cause Your Majesty or the Empress to come and torture her. But now her fetus was stable. Under the care of Bingtang, she felt that her body was much stronger these days. The 2 children were very lively and the fetal movement was very stable and strong. In addition, Your Majesty would definitely not dare to cause internal strife because of the current situation in the court. Even if he was afraid of Pang Xiao, now was not the best time to shed all pretense of cordiality. He probably wouldn't do anything to her children openly. What's more, when her children were born 4 months later, the news couldn't be hidden. Therefore, it didn't matter even if it was spread now. Madame Ma didn't know what Qin Yining was thinking. She only thought that she also felt uncomfortable in her stomach and wanted to find an imperial physician to diagnose. She was anxious and hurriedly ordered someone to take Pang Zhao's invitation to the imperial hospital to find an imperial physician. The Sun Clan also felt worried and took a handkerchief to wipe Qin Yining's sweat. "You're heavy. It's really hard for you to not use ice on such a hot day. How about we go back to the room? Mother will find you a yard with more shade. We can move there and you can feel cooler. Mother, see, Qin garden is very good. The shade is covered by the trees and it's not so hot." Qin Yining held the Sun Clan's hand with amusement. "Don't be nervous. I'm fine. It looks better than when you just came back. But as the old madam said, your belly is indeed a little bigger. The Sun Clan once saw a woman with an unknown disease. She was not pregnant, but her belly swelled. Later, she died of pain. It was said that after the woman died, there was a big lawsuit. After the autopsy, the coroner found that there was a tumor in the woman's belly. Of course, the Sun Clan couldn't say this to Qin Yining. Now that the girl was heavily pregnant, she couldn't wait to treasure her. Why would she scare her? However, as a mother, she could only hide her worries in her heart. The Ma clan and the Sun Clan supported Qin Yining to sit down on the beautiful woman under the shade. Bingtang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, and Lian Xiaozhou brought over refreshments and fruits. Bingtang looked at the furrowed brows of the Sun Clan and Ma Shi. He couldn't help but smile and say, "You two do not need to worry. Wang Fei's body is very good, and the child is also very healthy. In a moment, when the Grand Doctor comes to take a look, you will know." The Sun Clan and the Ma clan knew that Qin Yining liked Bingtang, and her medical skills were indeed brilliant, so they didn't mind her sudden interruption and nodded with a smile. However, the news of Si Qin Garden calling for an imperial physician still spread to the study in the outer courtyard. Pang Xiao, Qin Huayuan, Second Master Qin, Third Master Qin, Qin Han, and Qin Yu all hurriedly rushed over. Before entering the courtyard, Qin Yining heard Qin Han's anxious voice from outside. Why did they suddenly call for an imperial physician? "Brother-in-law, isn't fourth sister's body usually very good?" There was a hint of questioning in his tone. Pang Shao didn't mind Qin Han's tone at all and said gently, perhaps they called for an imperial physician to check her pulse. Sister Yi's body is very good. Brother-in-law, don't worry. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw several people come in from outside. Qin Huayuan walked at the front. Seeing Qin Yining, the Sun clan, and the Ma clan under the corridor, the men's footsteps all stopped. Second Master Qin was a bit embarrassed and said with a smile, eldest niece, we were just in the study when we heard that you called for an imperial physician. We were a bit anxious and rushed over together. Normally, men outside the family were not allowed to enter other people's inner courtyards. However, the inner and outer courtyards of the prince's mansion were now divided into families. In the past, the whole family also lived in one courtyard, so Qin Yining didn't care about this. I'm quite good. I just wanted to call for an imperial physician to check my pulse. Qin Yining stood up while holding his stomach. Qin Huayuan smiled and looked at Qin Yining. His daughter was married and lived in the inner courtyard. The father and son couldn't play chess or fish together like they used to when they were at home. They also couldn't go to the study and pester him to read books. However, Qin Huayuan only had this one precious child. Qin Yining's supreme position in his heart would never change. Quickly sit down. There's no need to pay attention to these complicated formalities in front of family members. Yes, father-in-law is right. Pang Shao also nodded with a smile. The whole family chatted and laughed as they walked into the main room. Ji Yun and Bing Tang brought the young maidservants to serve tea and fruits. Qin Huayuan exchanged a few more pleasantries with Madame Ma and sincerely thanked Madame Ma for taking care of Qin Yining. Everyone in the Qin family knew that Madame Ma was good to Qin Yining. Other than Qin Huayuan, who knew about the actions of Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan, second old master, third old master, Qin Han, Qin Yu, and the others didn't know the inside story. They only thought that it was inconvenient for Yao Qinggu to take care of him as a man, so they let Madame Ma take care of him and let the Yao clan stay by his side. As in-laws, it was very rare to have someone by Qin Yining's side to take care of him and ask about his well-being. Moreover, this person was the elder with the highest seniority. At least, Qin Yining's biological grandmother didn't care about Qin Yining at all. Therefore, Qin Han, Qin Yu, second old master, and third old master were very grateful to Madame Ma and praised Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan greatly. Madame Ma felt guilty in her heart when she received these praises. At this time, she was sure that Qin Huayuan and Qin Yining didn't spread these things to anyone else at all and saved the Yao clan's face to the greatest extent. Madame Ma liked Qin Yining even more and felt even more guilty. At this time, the Imperial Hospital's imperial physician's son, who was taking the Empress's pulse, was called in. Qin Yining was invited into the inner room and lay down on the bed. Ji Yun and Xian Yun put down the inner layer of light muslin curtains on the left and right side, only exposing Qin Yining's white wrist. Imperial physician's son sat down on the embroidered stool and concentrated for a moment before carefully diagnosing Qin Yining through a layer of muslin. Qin Huayuan and the other men were standing outside a falling flying cover at this time. Madame Ma and the Sun clan were in the inner room with their servant girls. Everyone held their breaths and concentrated, even breathing softly for fear of disturbing Imperial physician's son's diagnosis. A moment later, Imperial physician's son stood up and bowed with a smile. Congratulations, congratulations. Wang Fei is 6 months pregnant. There is no doubt that you are twins. When Bing Tang heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. She had promised Qin Yining not to spread it and had been holding it in for a long time. Now, she could finally laugh out loud. Madame Ma, the Sun clan, and the rest of the people in the outer room except for Pang Shao were all stunned for a moment before bursting with joy. Madame Ma held hands with the Sun clan in surprise and asked Imperial Physician Sun in surprise and joy, "Is this true?" "It is true, it is true. Wang Fei's fortune is profound and her fetus is stable. Congratulations to Wang Yi and everyone. Many thanks, many thanks." Madame Ma was grinning from ear to ear. She repeatedly spoke politely and stuffed a pouch into the hands of Imperial Physician Sun's attendants. "Quickly invite Imperial Physician Sun to have tea in the outer room." Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan also came forward to greet and exchange pleasantries. It wasn't convenient for Second Master and the others to stay for a long time. They were also happy and returned to Snow Plum Courtyard with this good news. Only the womenfolk were left in the room. At this time, the Sun clan was so happy that their eyes were filled with tears. "So it's not a major symptom, but twins. That's really great." Madame Ma also smiled, "So it's like this." Looking at the expressions of Qin Yining and Bing Tang, Madame Ma suddenly understood and said, "You two girls, you hid it from me so bitterly. Did you know long ago?" Qin Yining smiled and pulled Madame Ma with one hand and the Sun clan with the other. He had them sit next to him and said in a low voice, "At the time, Bing Tang checked my pulse and realized this. We originally wanted to tell the family, but at the time, the Empress had just become pregnant and Your Majesty's health had just recovered. In addition, my health wasn't good at the time and my fetus was unstable. I was afraid that if something happened due to jealousy, I wouldn't be able to bear it, so I suppressed this matter. Now, my health is better. I don't have to be afraid. In any case, in a few months, this news won't be a secret. So it's like this." Madame Ma nodded, "It's been hard on you and Dai Fu to be so considerate. We're always in the inner residence and only think about the small matters at hand. We can't be so considerate. You, on the other hand, are different from us. You're smart and know how to judge the situation. With you around, Dai Fu won't be so lonely. In the future, you and Dai Fu will be in charge of these matters. You hit it very well this time." Qin Yining heard this and couldn't help but smile. "As long as grandmother isn't angry at us, it's fine." The entire residence quickly learned that Qin Yining was pregnant with twins. Not to mention, when the old madam heard the news, she only curled her lips. Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan were also very surprised when they heard the news. Her belly was so big, I thought that she lied about the month of her pregnancy. So it's actually twins. Looking at it like this, I kind of believe that the child is Dai Fu's. The Yao clan opened their eyes wide and said hesitantly. Yao Qinggu asked, "What's wrong?" "I heard that the ancestors must have twins before the children and grandchildren can have twins." "Father, you don't know, but Dai Fu's father is a twin. He also has a twin sister, but she died when she was young." "Really?" Yao Qinggu sat up straight and stopped smoking. The Yao clan nodded and said, "Really? I've been a servant of the Pang family for so long. Although this matter is not mentioned in the residence, it's not a secret." Yao Qinggu blinked and murmured, "Could it be that we really made a mistake?" The Yao clan also nodded slowly. Perhaps this matter was really subjective. They ignored Pang Xiao's words and unilaterally believed that Qin Yining was disloyal. If they really made a mistake, then wouldn't they have made a fuss for nothing? They were clearly doing it for the good of Pang Xiao, but in the end, they made it sound like they wanted to murder Pang Xiao's biological child. Thinking of this, Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan suddenly felt a headache. The Yao clan said, "Father, what should we do? Should I go to Dai Fu and take a look?" Chapter 587. Qin Yining naturally didn't know what Yao Qinggu and the Yao clan were thinking. Ever since the news that she was pregnant with twins spread, everyone in the Fu treated her like a fragile treasure. They were careful with her food and lifestyle. Even Qin Huayuan had to visit her every day to feel at ease. The news that Qin Yining was pregnant with twins also reached Li Qitian's ears, just as she and Pang Xiao expected. When Li Qitian heard the news, he was walking with Ji Ziyu in the imperial garden. When they heard the spy's reply, the two stopped in their tracks and fell silent at the same time. After a long time, Li Qitian chuckled. He turned around to look at Ji Ziyu and said, "You and Anyang have been married for some time now. Why haven't you heard any good news from Anyang?" Ji Ziyu gradually clenched his hands behind his back. He said expressionlessly, "The princess still doesn't like this subject." Li Qitian looked at Ji Ziyu's cold expression. He finally remembered what his younger sister had done. She was infatuated with Pang Xiao and kept a male companion similar to Pang Xiao. It was embarrassing. He was too jealous just now, so he couldn't control his emotions. Forget it. Pang Zhishi is just that lucky. Li Qitian walked again and said in a deep voice, "Some people are born with that kind of good luck. They are more talented than others, healthier than others, and have better family backgrounds than others. There's no point in being envious." Compared to Pang Xiao, Li Qitian didn't have a prominent family background. In terms of political and military achievements, he wasn't as good as Pang Xiao. Even now that he was the emperor, the people's support for him wasn't as high as Pang Xiao's. Even if there were people who said that Pang Xiao was bloodthirsty, most of them were in awe of him. Unlike Li Qitian, the people only knew that his surname was Pang Xiao. He didn't have any other achievements. He didn't have outstanding military achievements like Pang Xiao, nor did he conquer Dian like Pang Xiao. What about Li Qitian's reputation? He gave the people the impression that the national treasury was poor. When the Titan attacked, he, the emperor, was almost scared to tears. Why was it that Pang Xiao always got all the good things? Ji Ziyu saw Li Qitian's expression and knew what he was thinking. He only said indifferently, "My life is in my own hands and not in the hands of the heavens. His Majesty is now the ruler of a country. Isn't that more important than anything else?" Li Qitian heard this and his expression froze. However, his mood gradually brightened. That's right. What did it matter what those swindlers said? What was the point of him fighting for so many years? Could it be that he had to let a swindler's judgment affect such important matters of the country? He was now sitting firmly on the throne. Could it be that he wasn't destined to be the emperor just because that swindler said that he wasn't? Li Qitian turned around and looked at Ji Ziyu, whose expression was as cold as ice, with approval. At this moment, Li Qitian's heart was no longer filled with resentment and jealousy. Because Ji Ziyu's words had enlightened him. There was no need for him to be angry or jealous. Because he was now the ruler of the world. Wasn't it just that the Qin clan was pregnant with twins? Now that his empress was pregnant, his concubines would also be pregnant one after another. Gradually, he would have more and more children. What did it matter if they were twins or not? Wasn't it just that Tian Jizi had predicted that the Ziwei Emperor's star would reach the top? He was the one sitting on the throne. That proved that the stinky nun had miscalculated. You're quite perceptive. Li Qitian chuckled and walked with his hands behind his back towards the flourishing pebbled path in the imperial garden. Ji Ziyu followed behind Li Qitian. His tightly clenched fists quietly relaxed. The wind blew past, drying the sweat in his palms, bringing with it a burst of coolness. Your Majesty. At this moment, another secret agent quickly came forward. He first bowed and saluted, then whispered a few words in Li Qitian's ear. When Ji Ziyu saw that the secret agent had come, he lowered his eyes and averted his gaze. When Li Qitian dismissed the secret agent and turned around, he saw Ji Ziyu looking down at a patch of flowers. Li Qitian secretly praised Ji Ziyu's tactfulness and said, do you know what happened just now? Replying to your majesty, this subject does not know. Ji Ziyu bowed respectfully. Li Qitian chuckled and said, we just heard a big joke. Now there's a rumor going around that the Dian dynasty's treasure is actually in the capital of Dezhou. The news has already spread in the capital. Don't you think it's funny? Ji Ziyu's mind raced and he said cautiously, this subject thinks that this is nonsense. Of course it's nonsense. Li Qitian's smile gradually turned into mockery. I won't hide it from you. When the treasure disappeared, it was in Yang County, near the old capital of Dian. We have already arranged for people to surround Yang County and the surrounding towns. Even the old capital of the Yan dynasty was not spared. We don't believe that there's someone who has the ability to bring such a large amount of treasure to the capital under our nose. Ji Ziyu had already vaguely guessed Li Qitian's thoughts and couldn't help but feel somewhat helpless. Sure enough, Li Qitian's next words were exactly as he had guessed. Who is the one who spread this news? It's obvious. Their goal is also very clear. Li Qitian chuckled mockingly again. That bastard Pang Zhishi actually had such evil intentions. How laughable. Our national treasury is in deficit. Don't tell me that for the sake of the treasure, we can't even use our brains. Ji Ziyu was standing behind Li Qitian. He opened his mouth and wanted to say that this matter might not have been done by Pang Xiao. It could have been instigated by others. However, Li Qitian's image of Pang Xiao as a traitor was deeply ingrained in his mind. If he spoke up for Pang Xiao, not only would it not make the situation better, but it would also make Li Qitian more suspicious of him. Ji Ziyu could only keep his mouth shut. While Li Qitian was scolding Pang Xiao, the news that the Dian dynasty's treasure was hidden in the capital had also reached Lu Hang's ears. Lu Hang, who was wearing a light blue outer robe and standing in front of the window tending to the flowers and plants, listened to the words of the people beside him. He absent-mindedly cut off the excess leaves of a jasmine plant and asked indifferently, where did the news come from? Replying to Master Lu, the news has already spread throughout the capital. The people on the streets are talking about it like it's a miracle. Lu Heng chuckled and shook his head. This kind of rumor was simply not credible. The treasure should be hidden near the old capital of Dian. Li Qitian was like a dog with a bone, guarding that place tightly. Who could transport the treasure to the capital under Li Qitian's nose? This matter was either Li Qitian deliberately mystifying things or Pang Xiao playing tricks. The monarch and his subjects were either testing each other or scheming against each other. Lu Heng said indifferently, continue to observe. If there is any new news, just report back. Yes. Master Lu. After the scout left, a pretty young girl in green walked along the corridor with a black tray in her hands. On top of the tray was a white porcelain bowl with a lid. When Lu Heng saw the girl through the half-opened window, he couldn't help but be stunned. Her curvaceous figure, her graceful steps, and her appearance couldn't be seen clearly from afar. However, Yiqing's long hair was loosely tied up, and the angle of her face when she walked over with lowered eyes was too similar to Qin Yining's. Lu Heng couldn't tell whether his heart ached or ached. By the time he came back to his senses, the young girl was already in front of him. Master Lu, please have some tea. Her voice was pretentious and her tone was pretentious. Her appearance was far inferior to Qin Yining's. It could be said that other than her figure and her long, smooth hair, they didn't have any similarities. Lu Heng immediately felt bored and waved his hand. You don't have to come to the study to serve me in the future. After saying that, he ignored her and turned around to cut off the jasmine plant that had just opened. Chapter 588. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao also received the same news at this time. This news. Qin Yining's slender and fair hand twirled the embroidery needle in her hair. She lowered her eyes and mended the sleeve that Pang Xiao had scratched. I don't think it's true. Pang Xiao snatched the needle and thread from her hand. Let them do it later. You don't have to do it. Be careful not to tire your eyes. He leaned to the side and picked up a palm leaf fan, fanning her with moderate strength. Then he said, the area around the old capital of the Yan dynasty is tightly surrounded. His Majesty has already dug 3 feet into the ground to search. Although he didn't find any treasures, it's impossible for him to watch people transport the things away. I think someone must have purposely leaked the news. Qin Yining had just found a worker to do it when she was stopped. She helplessly took a fan and said lazily, maybe your Majesty wants to observe your performance. Or maybe it's a trap. It's not just your Majesty. Pang Xiao pondered and blurted out what was in his mind. Qin Yining thought for a moment and said, that's right. Maybe someone else did it. We don't know. After all, Pang Xiao wasn't just Your Majesty was a strong opponent. There were many people who didn't like him. Pang Xiao saw that her expression was natural. She couldn't even sit comfortably because of her swollen abdomen. She could only lean against the pillow in a comfortable position. The weather was hot, and it was more tiring for her. Her hands and feet were a little swollen. How could Pang Xiao have the heart to let her work so hard on these things? Therefore, he kept his speculation about Lu Heng in his heart and didn't say it out loud. Ever since he noticed that Lu Heng's feelings towards Qin Yining seemed to be getting more and more paranoid, he became more vigilant. However, Qin Yining hadn't done anything wrong from the beginning to the end. He didn't want to blame her because of an outsider's inappropriate thoughts and actions. After all, she didn't want things to turn out this way either. What should we do now? Qin Yining asked. I think that regardless of whether this news is true or not, it must be a trap. Do you have a countermeasure? Pang Xiao smiled. I was just about to ask you. What do you think? When Qin Yining saw the look on his face, he couldn't help but raise his chin and say arrogantly, you have so many strategists under your command. Why do you have to make things difficult for a woman who only knows how to embroider? Pang Xiao couldn't help laughing at her pretty appearance. He hugged her shoulder and kissed her forehead, which made Qin Yining blush and push him away. It's broad daylight and there are screens hanging on the windows. What are you doing? Pang Xiao saw her appearance and was in a good mood. He hugged her and kissed her loudly. Then he said contentedly, You only know how to be humble. I have never seen a second woman who only knows how to embroider, who can survive in such a difficult environment. In terms of resourcefulness, you don't lose to my strategists. Then go ask your strategists. Right now, I'm only responsible for the 2 in my stomach. I don't care about anything else. Good. You've worked so hard. I won't ask you. However, I think that since this matter is strange, we shouldn't do anything. We should just live our lives normally. Anyways, there are people who are worried about the treasure. No matter who set this trap, we just don't step into it. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. I think so too. No matter what they do, we just won't take it. Pang Xiao reached out with his index finger to scratch her nose. Just as he was about to tease her, he saw Xian Yun come in. Wang Yi, princess consort. There's a crippled monk with a pockmarked face outside the door. He said that his divination is especially accurate. He knows that princess consort is pregnant and specially came to divine the future heir. Qin Yining laughed when he heard this. This divination, he knows that I'm pregnant with the heir before he even sees me. Xian Yun couldn't help but laugh when she heard this. Do you want him to divine which one you're pregnant with is the heir? Her amusing words made Pang Xiao and Qin Yining laugh. After laughing, Pang Xiao said seriously, our situation is special now. It's not suitable for us to meet outsiders. If the other party has the slightest bit of ill intent, we can't guard against it. Xian Yun, go tell the people outside to not neglect this great master and to treat him well. Since the great master's divination is accurate, then he can divine clearly even through a few courtyard walls. Xian Yun smiled and bowed. Yes, this servant will go now. Qin Yining also instructed, you're all in the Jianghu, and it's not easy to survive. It's convenient for you to do more. It's also for the sake of the future heir. Yes. Xian Yun responded again and went to the outer courtyard. Qin Yining sat up and wanted to put on her shoes. Pang Xiao immediately took the soft-soled embroidered shoes and helped her put them on. What are you doing? Aren't you going to lie down for a while? My bones are sore from resting all the time. My hands and feet are swollen and uncomfortable. Maybe I'll feel better after walking. Then I'll accompany you. Pang Xiao turned around and took a paper umbrella, then followed Qin Yining. Seeing Wang Yi accompanying the princess consort for a walk, Bing Tang and Ji Yun also called a servant girl from the corridor to follow behind the two from a distance. Pang Xiao opened the paper umbrella to shade Qin Yining from the sun and said with a smile, after a while, I'll build a swing for you in the courtyard. Although you can't play now, you can play with the child in the future. I plan to move a grape trellis over to the corridor over there. When summer comes, you can cool down under it and see the strings of purple. It'll be interesting to look at. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. She held Pang Xiao's arm and looked up at him. You've been spending so much time with me recently. Is there something you need to do at home? Of course there's something. Isn't it just to accompany you? Pang Xiao's smile was very gentle. Qin Yining was dazzled by his smile. She couldn't help but think that a man's charm could also mislead people. Amused, she said, don't you have anything else to do other than accompany me? Silly girl, I don't want anything right now. I just want my wife and child to warm the Kong bed. That's all. Right now, I only want to have no peace of mind. I don't want to do anything other than protect you. Letting you and your child be safe and sound is our family's fortune. Other things can't move my heart at all right now. Pang Xiao tilted the paper umbrella. The sunlight shone down and was very strong. He didn't want Qin Yining to feel uncomfortable. Qin Yining laughed out loud when he heard this and said, don't worry. Our entire family has placed such importance on my pregnancy, so how could there be anything that would not go according to our wishes? But you guys are so serious. It makes me feel very pressured. What if the child I give birth to isn't what you guys want? What isn't Rui? It's either a boy or a girl. I like both sons and daughters. Of course, if you can give birth to 2 daughters, I'll like it the most. Pang Xiao laughed as he spoke. Seeing his rare dazed expression, Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh as well. I don't know why you like daughters so much. It'll be great to have a daughter. She'll be smart and beautiful like you. Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining's shoulder, but he didn't dare to put all his weight on her shoulder. He only raised his arm and hugged Qin Yining. In the future, I'll teach her martial arts so that even the son-in-law can't bully her. Qin Yining nodded and said, I think my father thought the same way back then. Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining's serious face and couldn't help but feel his heart itch. His smile became even gentler. The two strolled around like this for a while. Qin Yining returned to his room as usual. Pang Xiao took advantage of Qin Yining's lunch break to go to the study. When Qin Yining woke up, he was guarding by her side again. The entire day passed in the blink of an eye. When the sky was dyed with the beautiful sunset, there was a burst of voices outside the door. Not long after, Xian Yun and Ji Yun came in side by side and bowed together. Wang Yi, Wang Fei. What is it? Qin Yining asked with a smile. Xian Yun handed over a piece of paper that was folded into a square. Wang Fei, this is the result that the great master calculated this morning. Qin Yining stilled. It had already been a day. She had already forgotten about the existence of that great master. Even Pang Xiao didn't take this person seriously. Qin Yining was just about to unfold the paper when Pang Xiao took the paper first. He stood up and walked a little further away to unfold the paper. He asked casually, why did he only send the paper now? Didn't he come early in the morning? Xian Yun said, that great master said that he had to spend a lot of effort to calculate. He had 2 meals and a snack in our residence. He even wrapped up the leftovers and took them away. Also, that great master might be a fake monk because he eats meat. The residents served him dompa pig knuckle at noon. He ate one in a few bites. Could this great master be a swindler? Pang Xiao looked at the contents of the paper. After making sure that it wasn't poisoned, he returned to Qin Yining's side. What's written on it? Qin Yining took the paper and looked at it. The handwriting was crooked, just like when a child first learned to write. He could barely recognize that it was words. The content was concise. The first sentence said, extremely noble people are protected by purple clouds. If you live in the residence, you will be safe and sound. At the bottom, it said, pitiful by Kushio, the southern picture rolls the clouds and water, the northern arch wears the heavenly Han. How magnificent is the strategy of the Minister of History. I am willing to fight the rebellion with you. Qin Yining looked at it carefully for a long time before he could distinguish the crooked words clearly. This great master's handwriting is really similar to mine when I was in the mountains. Pang Xiao also smiled. The part below seems quite familiar. Qin Yining looked at it carefully again and couldn't help but murmur. Immediately, his expression changed. He slapped the table and said, quick, go and catch that monk. He is a Tian Jizi. Xian Yun and Ji Yun were both shocked. Pang Xiao didn't doubt it and immediately ordered Huzi to take people to chase after the monk. After they left, Pang Xiao said, how did you know? Qin Yining said, this is Du Zimei's poem. There are 2 sentences missing. The first sentence is pitiful by Kushio, the next sentence should be, the mysteries of heaven are clear. The first sentence of, I am willing to fight the rebellion with you, should be, drive the young masters. If the handwriting is like this, why would it cut out a part of Du Zimei's poem for no reason, and it just so happens that the 2 sentences the mysteries of heaven are clear and drive the young masters are missing. Although Pang Xiao studied the art of war and was good at planning, it was not difficult for him to fight 100 enemies on the battlefield. His method of arranging troops and setting up battle formations was even more terrifying. But in terms of knowledge, he really couldn't compare to Qin Yining. After all, Qin Yining had learned from Shi Bin and Qin Huayuan. Chapter 589. Qin Yining pursed her lips. At this time, she couldn't tell whether Tian Jizi had good or bad intentions towards Pang Xiao, or if she had her own plans. However, Qin Yining was sure that Tian Jizi would kill her as soon as possible. When Tian Jizi instigated a Nari to kill her in the Taten, she had already recognized the reality. Qin Yining looked at the note again and murmured, a very noble person is protected by purple aura. If you stay in the mansion, you will be safe. Very noble person and purple aura. She still thinks that you are the Ziwei Emperor star. Yes. Pang Xiao muttered, what is she hinting at? If you stay in the mansion, you will be safe. Is she reminding us not to go out in the near future? I think so. But whether you go out or not is not up to you. What if your Majesty orders you to go to war with the Taten? Can you resist the order? Wouldn't that be like sticking your head out to catch your Majesty's tail? Pang Xiao nodded, but in her heart, she thought that if she really didn't want to obey the order, she could also find a proper way to achieve her own goal. Back then, she directly resisted the 33 imperial edicts, mostly because she was angry. Qin Yining was lost. If he couldn't find her, he might as well go with her. That was why he didn't care about the consequences. Don't worry. Anyway, what I want now is for you to give birth safely. I don't want any fame or fortune. I'll just stay at home with you. Then, everything will be fine. Qin Yining nodded, but she was still anxious. She felt that Tianjizi was brewing a big conspiracy. At this time, someone came in and reported, "Wang Yi, we didn't catch the monk. When our people chased after him, the monk had already run away." Qin Yining and Pang Xiao looked at each other. Maybe it's Mr. Mu. Yes. Pang Xiao nodded. In fact, they had already expected this. Since Tianjizi was willing to leave a note with a hidden signature, she must have been confident that they would not be able to catch up with her. Moreover, Mu Jinghu was highly skilled in martial arts and qigong. It would not be difficult for him to protect Tianjizi. Pang Xiao sighed softly and said, "Forget it, we don't have to take it to heart. In any case, we plan to spend our days peacefully and won't wander around outside. Let's do it this way for now." Qin Yining nodded in agreement and temporarily hid his worries and doubts. In the next few days, Qin Yining paid special attention to the changes outside. When he met with Qin Huayuan, besides chatting about daily life, they also talked about national affairs. Although Qin Huayuan had been removed from his official position, he still had a keen sense for politics. He was very brilliant in his criticism of the current situation. Moreover, his words were reasonable, slow, and very persuasive. On this day, Qin Yining and Qin Huayuan were talking when they heard the sound of a servant bowing to Pang Xiao. The father and daughter looked towards the door and saw Pang Xiao wearing a moon-white shirt with arrow sleeves. She walked in with a smile on her face. When she saw that Qin Huayuan was also there, she bowed first and said, "Father-in-law." Qin Huayuan smiled and nodded, "You're back." "Yes." Pang Xiao went to the washroom to change clothes and wash up. After she was done, she went to the outer room and sat down next to Qin Yining. She smiled and looked at her belly. Qin Huayuan was very satisfied to see the young couple like this. The three of them chatted for a while. Qin Huayuan said, "The Empress Dowager's birthday is coming soon. Is there any news from the palace?" Pang Xiao smiled and nodded, "I was just about to tell father-in-law. The Empress Dowager is not celebrating her birthday this year. Your Majesty's intention is to hold a family banquet in Ci and Palace and invite the imperial relatives and some of the nobles." Qin Huayuan nodded and said, "You will definitely be invited. Your Majesty will probably let the two of you enter the palace together. When the time comes, you have to be careful." "Yes. Father-in-law, rest assured. I will definitely be careful." Sure enough, Your Majesty's decree was delivered to the residence by a young eunuch that afternoon. Li Qitian really did invite Prince Zhongshuan and Princess Consort to attend the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet on the 26th of August. Pang Xiao politely accepted the decree and even gave the eunuch a big red envelope. But when he turned his head, he became melancholy. He didn't dare to show his melancholy in front of Qin Yining. He knew Li Qitian's character the best. Other people might not do anything to reduce their own mother's lifespan during her birthday banquet, but Li Qitian wouldn't stick to these kinds of small details. Qin Yining's current situation couldn't afford even the slightest bit of risk. Pang Xiao went to the study and called Xiaoyu and Su Weiji to follow him. Su Weiji and Xiaoyu saw Pang Xiao's serious expression. They also straightened their expressions and asked seriously, "If Wang Yi has any instructions, just let us know." Pang Shao frowned and told the two about the family banquet in Ci and Palace on the birthday banquet. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji also became serious. The guests for the birthday banquet should be the imperial relatives and the nobles. Not all of the nobles are qualified to attend. In my opinion, we should figure out who your majesty invited in advance and then analyze it. Su Weiji thought, and his voice was slower than usual, Your Majesty isn't a person who rigidly adheres to filial piety. We still need to make sufficient preparations. In case there's a sudden change. This king also thinks so. This king is worried about the princess consort. She can't afford to be tossed around now. If something happens because of the birthday banquet, this king won't be able to follow her all the time when she enters the palace. Pang Shao didn't finish his words, but they could already feel his deep worry. He had lost once, so now he was especially careful and worried about personal gains and losses. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji could understand, not only because of Pang Shao's love and care for Qin Yining, but more importantly, Qin Yining's twin in her belly was the continuation of the Pang family's bloodline. The inheritance of an heir was a big matter, and nothing could be more important than this. Su Weiji was good at strategizing, and Xiaoyu was good at making decisions. The two of them discussed in low voices. During this time, Pang Shao also thought of some countermeasures. In the end, the three of them agreed on a method to coordinate inside and outside the palace in case of an emergency. Pang Shao felt that this method was feasible, so he went to visit Qin Huayuan. He told Qin Huayuan their plan. When Qin Huayuan heard Pang Shao say that he wanted to arrange for the prefectural soldiers to be stationed outside the palace, Qin Huayuan hesitated and said, although using the prefectural soldiers is a last resort, it will be used against us by someone with ulterior motives. When the time comes, there will be an issue. Father-in-law Darren is right. However, at this critical moment, nothing is more important than Sister Yi's safety. I plan to arrange for several dozen prefectural soldiers to be stationed outside the palace. The rest of the people will find a way to be placed into suitable positions before the holy birthday. This way, they won't be too conspicuous. Qin Huayuan frowned and thought for a moment. He still nodded and said, it's necessary to pay attention to the situation inside the palace, but we can't forget about the rear. When Pang Shao heard this, he immediately felt enlightened. Qin Huayuan was reminding him that the other party might use a strategy of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Taking advantage of Pang Shao's mobilization of all the people would be disadvantageous to the family. Qin Huayuan continued, there are two families living in the prince's estate, and they are all your and Sister Yi's relatives. For the sake of your future happiness, we can't ignore these considerations. I also hope that my fears are groundless. However, the calamity that befell our clan when we were in Great Yen was too unforgettable. During that calamity, they lost many family members and close friends. Qin Yining was seriously injured at the time and almost lost his life. Although Qin Yining later compensated the families of those servants with a large sum of money, everyone only had one life. No amount of money could buy it back. Chapter 590. Qin Huayuan stood up, patted Pang Shao's shoulder encouragingly, and said, you can arrange all these things. I trust you. Pang Shao was moved as he heard this. He bowed respectfully. After he caused Qin Yining to wander from place to place, his father-in-law, Qin Huayuan, never once blamed him. Pang Shao could see that Qin Huayuan was not pretending to be tolerant. He was really tolerant and cared for him as a junior. This kind of care from a male elder was very novel to him. It was different from his grandfather's dependence and expectation on him. Qin Huayuan was wise and tolerant, and he had a unique charm as a father. Qin Huayuan sighed, I have some people in my hands. You know, they are the Dian Emperor's secret Sai led by Madame Chow. Your Majesty knows about their existence, but if we use them carefully, we shouldn't arouse your Majesty's suspicion. Yes. When I'm ready, I'll talk to Aunt Chow. Qin Huayuan nodded slightly. The father-in-law and son-in-law then talked about other things. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was August 26th, the day of the Emperor's birthday. Qin Yining still had some resistance to going to the palace to attend the banquet. She was now in her 3rd month of pregnancy, her body was heavy, and she was more tired than before. She felt tired just thinking about going to the palace to deal with those people who had bad intentions or were hypocritical. Qin Yining was a bit listless since she dressed up in the afternoon. Pang Xiao could see Qin Yining's resistance, and he only felt guilty. If it weren't for the current tense situation, he wouldn't have wronged Qin Yining. But now he was seeking stability everywhere, and the last thing he wanted was to anger Li Qitian. He wasn't afraid of Li Qitian, but he was afraid that Li Qitian would hurt Qin Yining if he made the slightest move. Right now, Qin Yining was very sensitive and worried. His emotions fluctuated easily. He was afraid that he would hurt the mother and son. At this critical juncture, they naturally had to endure as much as they could and try not to cause any trouble. Pang Xiao gently coaxed Qin Yining, "I'll accompany you to Ci and palace later. Don't worry, they won't dare to do anything to you." Qin Yining suppressed the irritation in her heart and allowed Xian Yun and Bing Tang to help her tie her long hair into a cloud bun. She put on the 3-headed jadeite phoenix pendant and the matching hair press that only a Qin Wang Fei was qualified to wear. She had also changed into a light blue jacket with arrow sleeves and a dark blue dress. "Aren't you going to accompany your Majesty? If the Empress Dowager only keeps the womenfolk to talk, could you still be thick-skinned enough to stay? What are you afraid of?" "I've always been thick-skinned. I just said that I want to listen to the Empress Dowager's teachings and feel close. Can the Empress Dowager drive me away?" Pang Xiao smiled unconcernedly. Seeing his handsome smile in the mirror, Qin Yining's heart softened a little, and a smile appeared on her face. You only know how to talk nonsense in front of me. How would I dare to talk nonsense in front of others?" Pang Xiao pretended to sigh and said, "If they know my true appearance, people won't be afraid of me when I walk outside in the future. What should I do?" Qin Yining snickered at his mischievous appearance. Bing Tang's drawing of her eyebrows almost became crooked. Seeing Qin Yining show a smile, everyone released a breath. Bing Tang said as she put on makeup for her, "This time, Your Majesty is not allowed to bring more people into the palace. This servant is not as useful as Ji Yun coming. This servant has prepared medicine for emergencies and put it in your pouch. Use it if you feel uncomfortable. Those are pills made from the medicine you usually take. The effects are the same. There is also a wax-sealed pill in the pouch. That is a detoxification pill. Even though it can't cure all poisons, it has a certain effect in emergencies. That little paper bag contains sleeping powder. If someone is disrespectful to you, you don't have to be polite with them. If you can't handle it, just hit them in the face. I guarantee that even 10 strong men like Wang Yi can knock them down." "Yeah." Pang Xiao crossed her arms. Her frightened expression was very real. "There's something like this." No, Bing Tang, you can't be biased. Your Wang Fei got this good thing. What if she knocks me down and does whatever she wants?" Bing Tang, Xian Yun, Ji Yun, and Lian Xiaozhou were all amused by Pang Xiao's vulgar and shameless words. Their faces turned red and they couldn't help but laugh. Qin Yining's depression dissipated. She laughed so hard that even the finger that was putting on her lipstick accidentally smeared the corners of her mouth. Pang Xiao liked to see Qin Yining laugh the most. When she smiled, her eyes curved. The dimples on her cheeks were especially sweet. When the corners of her lips rose, she appeared bright and lovable. When Pang Xiao saw her smile, her heart would soften and her body would go limp. Luckily, Qin Yining was not a person who would bring disaster to the country and people. He was not a fatuous ruler. But Pang Xiao could understand the feelings of King Zhou of Shang and King Yu of Zhou at this time. Good, Sister Yi. Pang Xiao went forward and bent his tall body like a shrimp. He hugged Qin Yining, who was sitting on the embroidered stool, from behind. He didn't dare to put all his weight on her and just hugged her lightly. Don't worry. I have a way to protect us. If it doesn't work, you still have the magical medicine that Bing Tang girl gave you. If it doesn't work, you can use the medicine to protect me. Qin Yining used her hand to poke Pang Xiao's forehead. She pushed him with a red face and said angrily, "All right, it's hot today. Don't you feel hot?" But she forgot that she had lipstick on her finger. She poked a red spot on Pang Xiao's forehead. Ji Yun and the others at the side couldn't stop laughing. Qin Yining also couldn't help laughing. She quickly took a handkerchief to help him wipe it. Pang Xiao saw his own appearance in the mirror and pretended to be fierce as he said, "You are not allowed to spread this matter outside. Especially in front of that brat Huzi." The last sentence was obviously directed at Bing Tang. Ji Yun and Xian Yun's faces were red from trying to hold back their laughter. They were not as red as Bing Tang's ears. They didn't dare to quarrel with Pang Xiao. They could only stomp their feet and say coquettishly, "Wang Fei, look at them." What could Qin Yining do? He could only join everyone in discussing when to marry off Bing Tang. Bing Tang couldn't stay in the room anymore. He said that he was going to check the medicine and ran away. After joking around for a while, Pang Xiao instructed Ji Yun, "Later, you will stay by Wang Fei's side. No one is allowed to leave. If anyone in the palace dares to touch Wang Fei, you don't have to be careless. I will back you up." Ji Yun nodded seriously. "Yes, Wang Yi. Don't worry. This servant will definitely protect Wang Fei well." After everything was prepared, Pang Xiao and Qin Yining got on the carriage. They brought along Huzi and Ji Yun and headed towards the palace together. Jinghu Wei and Qin Huayuan silver-masked secret agents had already set up defenses in the Fu. They had also set up an ambush outside the palace, just in case. The carriage slowly stopped in front of the palace gates. Qin Yining was helped by Pang Xiao into the oil wall carriage prepared by the palace. The oil wall carriage was small. Pang Xiao walked beside the carriage. As they moved forward, he introduced to Qin Yining the various buildings in the palace in a low voice. Qin Yining lifted half of the curtain and looked outside in the direction that Pang Xiao introduced. The two of them were dressed up. Pang Xiao's gaze was so gentle that it could melt the coldest ice. Qin Yining's smile was filled with happiness and satisfaction. From afar, it looked like a painting. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.